And we're live. Well, Romy, what's up, man?
Not much. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, I'm so happy you're here, man. I Zach texted me last week. He's like, dude, I have such a good idea for your podcast. I'm like, what? He's like, Avraham Blaut. And I'm like, that's actually really. You and I always love talking to you about like anything. So Zach was like, yeah, Romy could talk to you about anything for as long as you want, for as long as for about anything, any topic you want to talk about. So I was
Yeah,
like, dude, for sure, man. I love that.
yeah. I feel very qualified to talk about things I don't know anything about, and I enjoy it greatly. So this is perfect for me. I'm gonna thrive in this environment.
It's so funny you say that. I was talking to Sam Chosak. Sam Chosak and I did an episode the other day, and the truth is that it's very difficult to be in touch with him. He's one of those guys that like he's just not just texting you, hey, what's up, or he doesn't pick up the phone and just say hi. And not about he's just always just doing life, and he's a quiet guy by himself. And we were talking about podcast. He was asking like, why do you think people enjoy a bunch of people just shooting the shit and talking about, anything, whether they're qualified or not. And like, because I think that in the last like 5 years, even 10 years, you could even say, that people just feel like they don't, either they're nervous to like have interactions with, strangers or, you don't have as many just laid back, long form conversations. Everyone just chills out and talks and just, takes them where the wind it takes, where the wind goes. But people do like that. Like it's something that people want. It's something people enjoy. So like what like, okay, you want to go for a qualified podcast, go, listen to an expert. But if you want to just like enjoy people just, enjoy the presence of company. Yeah, it's like, it's the same reason why we all love sitcoms. It's like you just enjoy positive interactions with people.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of casual literature out there, like where people are like, oh, because of social media or because of like this technology or that technology, we just have way less day to day interaction with strangers or like anything like that. Like, and you can like dig into it in all kinds of angles. If I go to get a coffee, well, now I can order it from my phone to be picked up. I won't even say one word to the barista anymore. Like, you just walk in, they have your coffee there, your name is on it, you pick it up and you walk out, and like that's it. Maybe they confirm that like you are who you say you are sometimes, but like
I was about to ask, do they ever confirm? Because I've never been asked one time. I walked into Starbucks whenever I've gotten like a pickup order, and they've never one time even looked at me, when I picked it up. And I usually, because I use my app, I order under my wife's name. They're like, they don't think, oh, you look like a Rachel. You don't look like a Rachel. They just like, okay, like this guy just coming in, taking a coffee and leaving, and that's
yeah,
it.
100%. Like it's just so little, and like it's in like I was just picking up like meds from CVS the other day for my mom, and obviously I'm not my mom, and I walked in there and they're like their name, and I said my mom's name. They're like date, and I said my mom's birthday, and like they like shot me one weird look, like this person doesn't look like they're in their 60s. This person looks like they're younger than that, and I was like, and but they didn't stop me, and I took the meds and I left, and I was thinking about how like even 15 years ago when I was doing the exact same errand, but for my grandparents, they had like a set pharmacy that they always went to. The pharmacist knew who she was and knew
Mm.
who I was and asked me about how she was doing and all that stuff. So like, and I'm not saying that like this is everyone's experience all the time, but like if you can see it this easily in all these little ways, it probably speaks to like this being like a sort of like, I'm not an expert, but like this seems like a pretty obvious reason why somebody would be like craving this level of like very casual interaction, right? Like it's not like the educational podcasts or something like that. Like, yeah, sure, there's time for those for people who like it, but like the reason that people like gravitate towards these like much lighter podcasts that are just like so conversational is because like they don't have that in their regular lives, like at all.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I was talking, yeah, and I believe also that like almost anything else, it's kind of a muscle, and it's kind of I think some people obviously have it more naturally or not, just like you can have someone that's more naturally athletic or not, but it is a muscle to make conversation, and it is a muscle to like it is like it does require like work. Like it's not easy, I mean, to like if you and I notice this with comedians, I notice this with podcasters, I notice this with teachers. Like if you're talking to someone and like they can like pull strands of conversation, right? Like you take a sentence and you pull at different pieces of the sentence and you stretch it out and you get to know someone that way. Like that's something that requires exercise, that these casual interactions are great practice for. It's like the equivalent of doing push-ups for, right? Like it's doing push-ups for conversation making. And since I started doing this, I found myself being able to make conversation. Like I teach part-time, and I found myself being able to make conversation with my students way better than I was able to in the last couple of years, I mean, it's just about following up and just noticing the nuance in anything that you say, just kind of keep on going at it. But if you don't have that exercise, it's a skill that like you might not necessarily have, that you might crave, that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that there's the more subtle version of the skill, like you're talking, and like there's the more subtle version where I say, I kind of leave something hanging, right? Like I'm like, oh, I was just talking about my brother. So you could be like, oh, how's your family doing, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, it's almost like subtly leading towards like, oh, that's why I'm in Atlanta. That's why.
Yes, yes, yes. You're setting up the pitch. You're
Yeah,
giving them,
and then
you're feeding them.
and it's not even on purpose, right? Like I wasn't like, oh, I hope Effie follows up to ask about like what I'm doing in Atlanta. I'm just like, this is just like the back of my brain, like the way back of my brain is doing this on its own. And if like you're saying, like if you have this muscle training that lets you notice these things, then you can follow up. And to me, I think the thing that's like profound about that is like it creates a better depth of interaction where like when you're thinking about a person, or you don't just think about the one thing you have in common. You think about how that thing connects you with the other ways that you're connected to that person, and it just creates like a much more depthful interaction, even in small ways, right? Like even in the way like you notice, oh, whatever, like a service employee has a pin on, and you ask about the pin, and now you're like, oh, I
Yes,
really want to go to
yes.
that restaurant, and then I asked about the pin. But like you're saying, if you don't have the muscle to notice the pin or to feel confident to say something about it, then like you'll get weaker at it and weaker at it, and like you'll atrophy, right? Like I think the muscle analogy works really well here.
Yeah, it really does. And I think it's funny because it's true too. Like I think that like there's parts of your like this is your brain, like this is what our brain we're talking about, and we know that our brain could atrophy without exercise. We also know that there's so many different components to the way that our brain is stimulated, so this is just one of them. But yeah, so I think people need it, and I think people want it. I've made a very conscious note to myself to start, just like I do this when I'm walking, or I do this when I'm jogging. I'm doing this when I'm even driving and I'm next to a car, like stopped at a red light. Like I'll just give someone a smile and like like a wave, or how you doing, and like there's something about doing that where you're establishing some kind of sense of camaraderie in your I think that people naturally gravitate. I actually think it probably has a lot to do with after COVID, because when everyone was kind of a threat to everyone else, you don't know who's sick, you don't know who's not, you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know whether you're going to catch a disease or not. Everyone became a threat to each other overnight. And then obviously, a very heated and radical political climate, everyone kind of feels like everyone else around them is potentially an enormous threat to them. And when you kind of just give them a little like, hey, what's up? You really disarm them, and then you kind of rebuild that sense of community, even if it's very superficial. Just a sense of like, hey, this guy's not out to get me. Just this guy's okay having a good time. And like, it makes a difference even to me, just how I feel about my day. Like I go about my day, if I'm having a bad day and I see the mailman dropping off mail at people's houses, I'm like, hey, how you doing, man? And they're like, oh, good, have a good day. Like you feel better. Like you walk away and you just feel like a better human.
Yeah, I I want to agree with what you said, but in the middle of what you were saying, you were like, it's even if it's superficial, but I think that minimization over the time, right? Like I do think you're right that like COVID definitely like just totally changed the game, but I also think that like there was a lot of things leading up to COVID that like we're shifting things in that direction. And like I'm a urban planner by like undergrad degree, and so like I'm happy to like blame the built environment and like things like that for like a
Tell me
lot of.
about that. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. I want to hear what you think about that.
I do. Okay, but really quickly before we move on,
Yes,
but
yes.
I think that some of our minimization of like, oh, these like more surface more surface community interactions. Just, oh yeah, they're so surface. Who cares? Like as long as I can have my like close friends, then those other ones just don't matter as much. And I think we like undervalued it to the point where like we've eliminated so many of them, and now we're looking around and like, oh, why does it like feel so lonely, or like why do I feel so disconnected from like my community or the people around me or different forms of what my, and it's like it's because we said all these little interactions don't matter, they're just tiny little nothings, and then like, oh, it turns out that like you aggregate them up and they matter a ton.
Oh, sure, you're right. So I didn't mean, so when I say superficial, I don't mean that, I don't mean superficial in value. I mean superficial in effort. Like,
Sure.
I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about the mailman. I don't know anything about the guy in the car next to me at the red light. I don't know anything about the cashier at Publix. I know that, but I do, yeah. So I phrased that, I must have phrased that incorrectly. Thank you. You know, I mean, it's an easy interaction that provides an enormous amount of value. How's that? As in the interaction might be superficial in content, but the value goes a lot further.
Yeah, yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, built environment, which I could talk about
Yes.
forever.
Dude, I want to hear about this. I'm so excited.
So I think that you'll find like a ton. Like it'd be really easy if you went to Google right now and we're like public spaces. Like you'll find like a million billion like papers and articles and whatever that have been written for as long as people have been writing about like philosophy. They've basically been writing about like, oh, what is this, like what does like the stoop of like ancient Rome, like what is the culture around this thing, how does it relate to like people's thoughts, like why do we build these, and like all the way through like modern times, and like which public infrastructures we invest in versus we don't, like is the city walkable, does the city have like public spaces for people to interact, do people actually use those spaces.
So you're talking about a physical, you're talking about the physical makeup of a city or a community having a psychological impact on the community.
Yeah, like the design of that community and how it
Cool.
affects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And there are a ton of examples where like they've done research where they took like more like derelict lots in bad parts of town, and they like turned them into like really small parks, right? Like it's just like it was a house that was like empty and destroyed, and they knocked down the house in like an appropriate, effective way, and they put up like two trees and a bench, and like every study they ever did was like everybody around that property were like happier, they were like enjoying life more, and everybody around the property they
Wow.
didn't do this to like weren't, and it's just like, oh, like I think it was a Philadelphia. I think they piloted this in like Philadelphia maybe, and it was just like, yeah, it was, and like over time, like what it did for property values and what it did for every like the just like every aspect that they could test, basically they were like, oh, this is like a crazy improvement. And all we've done is like remove this otherwise destroyed building, which even like, and they like had heart rate monitors attached to the people who live there, right? So like it's one thing if I'm an outsider in a community that I don't understand and I'm like unnerved by it, but this was people who live in the community, the neighbors of the houses that were destroyed, and they walked by it and their heart rate would jump up, and it was like, oh, that's like not great, like that's like a physical reaction telling us that like they are negatively responding to like this, like the physical infrastructure of this destroyed house. And then like
Wow.
got rid of it, they would see like steady heart rates or heart rates go down and stuff like that. And it was just like, oh, this is like, as far as like, research being what research is, like this is the closest thing to like casual empirical evidence that like I'll catch wind of and be like, well, this seems like this fits in line with my worldview and like is a good explanation. You read the study once, I'm not gonna like whatever back it beyond that, but I was like, this is like very specific example, which I think helps to extrapolate the larger point. Because you could also talk about um, like the more like community aspects of this thing where people can meet in the park, or like do people actually use their public libraries, which have like a crazy amount of services, but like if you're just not, you just don't think to, or you're just too nervous to, then like there's this space which is literally designed for us to go to and interact with in this way that we're talking about, like maybe we don't get enough of, and maybe that's why we crave like some of these things we're getting from podcasts or other things. And it's like, oh, but I could actually get this by like going to the library and speaking with the other people who are there for whatever like event or benign like like time and space that's created for us to just interact in this way.
Right. Right. That's so, yeah. I mean, so I noticed that, I mean, yeah, I've noticed that actually a couple of times just in my, just in like throughout my life, like when I would go to different cities. one of the things I would try, like I would do is like look up things to do in the city, and I was like, you know what, all these lists, like they're nice and they're really cool, they're highlights, but I started looking up instead of looking up like things to do in like let's say Portland, Oregon, I'd look up like I'd look up where the locals hang out, or like what the local, what non-touristy things are to do, where like you could get a real flavor of like what the real community and what the people that actually live there are like. I did that in New Orleans, I did that in Austin, I did that in Oregon, I did that here in Florida where I live, and I did that in Ireland actually, where Zach and I were in Dublin, and we were there, and like we did all like these, we hit all these big classic tourist spots, the Guinness factory, the Jameson factory, and we did these tours and these castles. And then I just looked up like like where the locals hang out, and like what do the locals do. And that was so incredible, and like you got a real sense of like, aside from community, you got a real sense of culture, you got a real sense of like, there's like, there you can tell that what you're experiencing and what you're participating in is the result of like years and years and years, in some cases hundreds of years, thousands of years of like emergent social history, that just culminates in like, oh yeah, we do this way, and this is the drink that we make this way, and this is the way that we play music over here in this way, and like, and you do, and you just, and you're participating, and you're curious, and you're engaged, and then you really really feel, and I think this is one of the most important things that I think that humans just love in general, like you feel like you were like a small little dot, and you got like a little bigger, like if, I like to give the example, like metaphor of like a snowball. And like the more you live life, if you live life, where you, if you, if, like a quote unquote more complete life is keep on packing on snow onto your little snowball until you become bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Because it sticks, and it starts to take part of who you are, and now I walk into an Irish pub, for example. I love Irish culture. There's just something about Irish culture that just really, really speaks to me. The music and the poetry and even the place, and it's kind of like down in their luck, but like we're determined to make to either figure out a way out of it or make the best of it, and like there's just something about it it really speaks to me. And I went to an Irish pub that I've just discovered here in Hollywood, and it was like the most authentic Irish pub I've been to outside of Ireland. And all the bartenders are Irish, a lot of the patrons there are Irish, a lot of the people are, and I'm sitting there and we're talking about all these things, and there was just, and I got this just feeling like this warm, meaningful sense of like, you know, we're all part of something that's, it's just so cool and so big and so wonderful, and and like what you said, I mean, if your community is geared towards giving that, allowing that space to breathe, then the people that are able to participate in it are just so much better off. We just have to find out how to get people to those places. People are afraid to like venture out, I feel like, unless you disagree.
No, I do think that people are. I mean, like obviously, like some people aren't, some people are, some people are in like a relatively specific context. But really quickly before I'm very big on like going back in
Yes.
conversationally. Do you know the term sonder or the word sonder?
Is that like, is that related to meander?
No, so sonder is like a word that is supposed to describe the feeling that like you get when you realize that like everybody around you has like a full life that's as complicated as your own. That like the it's like the word to describe the feeling that you're talking about. Like, oh,
Right.
I am like acknowledging the depth of the world around me, like as a feeling, not as like a thought. I mean, also as a thought, but specifically as a
Sure.
feeling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like one of my favorite words, and I love to talk about like the concept of it. And like, so often we have really bad words for feelings. So like, when I find a good one, I'm like, oh, I'm keeping this word forever.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
but to like more directly, to actually go to your question, like I do think people like really want this, and I think that and like you hear there's all like the like there's like so many songs written about like I am in a place that's crowded, but I feel alone, right? And like New York City,
Yes.
pinnacle example
Yes.
of that. Like, how can you be in a city with that many people where you literally cannot walk for like 10 minutes at any time of day and not see like multiple people and be like, wow, this is like a very like I feel just disconnected to like all of this history and all of this like depth of living. And when you acknowledge that that's what you want, it's sometimes just like, how do I get that? And
Yeah.
for some people it's a little bit more obvious, like I if you have like a specific hobby that you're not getting to execute on, let's say you really like to play sports, you can find potentially in your area like a pickup league or like whatever, like a more organized thing, and then like you can tap into like that community, the Upper West Side. Me and Zach like to go and play pickup soccer at Riverside Park. So like we're like somewhat tapped into this like pickup soccer community that just lets us like play the game and have a good time. And it's like, so every time we go there, it's like so nerve wracking. We're like, oh, how do we walk up to this random group of strangers, even though we've done it?
Yes.
And
Yes.
go,
It's
hey,
so hard.
you're here for the same reasons. Do you just want to play together? And half the time, like maybe English isn't even their first language, and it's like, well, we both speak soccer, so it doesn't really matter if
Hmm.
we both speak English. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like, and I'm like, I think it is a fair thing to describe me as like a relatively outgoing person. And even I'm like, I like step onto the field and I'm like, wow, everyone here thinks I'm a joke and does not want to play with me, and all these people like you're a 5-year-old kid, and it's just like getting past those things, or even getting to the place where you're comfortable enough to go all the way to the field, or whatever example it might be for you, if you're
Sure.
not already like fully locked into a community, is like, I don't know. I just think it's hard, and I do think that like we've made it harder, right? Your example of like COVID telling us all the reasons why we should be scared of other people, or like general discourse just telling us all the reasons why we should disagree with people, instead of focusing on like, well, why should I agree with this person, and like what should I
Right.
do about that, is very,
Totally.
it's hard not to say that like we have to hold people accountable for our different opinions, and like whatever, that's a rabbit hole, but like, but if this is definitely a negative outcome of that, like all other things aside, like it's just so bad to walk around and be like, I feel this anxiety about this thing, which I think it's extremely normal to feel, but like, how do you get over that? Like you can't just accept that that's how you're going to feel and then not be able to build community, right? If you were like, if I go to this Irish pub and they're gonna think that like I'm a poser, I don't really know, or I'm not supposed to
Dude,
be
I'm
there.
walking in with a kippah. I mean, I'm as far out as like as this Irish community can really like, see. I mean, like a tall Jewish guy with a kippah on and like his wife in a sheitel or a tichel, covering her hair. They're like, what the heck is this couple doing? And I get a Guinness on tap, and I start talking about some Irish stuff, and they're like, oh wait, this guy's part of it.
Yeah. You're somewhat, you're dialed in, and it's I'm sure it would be fun to ask one of them the next time you're in there, like, what did you think when I walked in? And like, did you think like this guy needs directions, or like, did you think I was actually like gonna be able to like hang, like was I was gonna be able
Yeah,
to
to
fit?
hang. Right, right, exactly. So to that point, I'm reading a book right now called Hope for Cynics. I'm a couple of chapters in, but the book was talking about it's so interesting, um, and it talks about how people perceive cynicism, which is just a general outlook that things are probably not going to be good or like the worst possible outcome, right? So if you're cynical, what's the weather like today? I don't know, probably rainy. Like, oh, can you trust this guy? Would you trust if you walk in if you're in the airport and you see like a regular person, not someone that might set off any kind of social warning or radar in your head, but regular looking person, would you trust him to ask him to watch your bag while you run to the bathroom for a second? Like these kind of questions, these kind of statements. Um, and it basically discusses the dangers of being cynical as opposed to a concept called healthy skepticism, which is or optimistic skepticism, which is I hope that things will go well. I give people benefit of the doubt, but I'm going to probe and protect myself also to be safe, right? Where it's kind of like because if you're cynical, you're kind of just assuming that everyone around you or everything around you is just bad or dangerous or harmful. And that definitely, I mean, I can't imagine a world in which that doesn't lead to a sense of isolation or loneliness. right? Um, but with 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 optimistic skepticism, it's I'll start to say hi to this person, and then I will keep an eye out for potential triggers or warnings, or warnings that will indicate that maybe this person's a threat. But you open yourself up to the possibility that they're not, and that you can now have a newfound, expanded relationship or positive interaction that will lead you to a better place, right? And we experience that on a personal level, and we also experience that on a community and national level, right? And they were talking about like, and there's polls taken by I think it's called the GSS. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a general something survey, but they poll people on all sorts of things, and trust in the government 50 years ago, or the president 50 years ago, I think it was at like 50 or 53%. Today it's at 28% or 38%. Trust in public schools was at 58% or 50%, and now it's at like 25%. Like ballparking, ballparking numbers. These aren't exact, but the point is that like there's been kind of like I think it's even global, I would imagine, but definitely a national within America mood of like I don't know I don't know that I could trust anyone, and that leads to isolation on like a mass scale, And you have to, and like the point of the book is to try to just say, listen, I don't know that you could trust anyone. I can't tell you that you could trust everyone. I don't know who you could trust or not. But if you assume that you can't trust anyone, then you'll never let anyone in to even the positive aspects of your relationship, and you'll never let anyone in to potentially have a positive interaction. So if I wave at so if I say good morning to someone on the street and they don't say anything back to me, great. I mean, I know that person's not interested in engaging, and I move on. But if I say good morning to someone on the street and they say, "Hey, how's your day going?" That opens up a sense of community that I think that we're like just collectively, seriously, like we want and we need.
Yeah, it's so complicated because I feel like it's probably a relatively fine line between like the concept of cynicism and the concept of like optimistic skepticism, like especially as it relates to like how you think about it and what actions you're actually taking, like and every situation is going to be slightly different. So when you're trying to like, let's say you're a generally cynical person and you're like, I want to shift my mentality, like how do you like there's no objective metric for like, and now I'm like not too cynical. And the other thing is that like I tend to think people are like really bad at understanding like statistics and math and those kinds of things, and like conceptualizing numbers into like
Sure.
action and
Everyday
reality.
application. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like I hold the like very strong stance that like human beings can't conceptualize the number above like 40,000, and it's like oh, how much is 40,000? It's like oh, like part of a smaller sporting arena, and it's like okay, now think about like other units of 40,000, and like it's really hard for people to be like yeah, what would 40,000 loaves of bread look like, right? Like it's just like a
It's,
very
it's hard. It's hard. Basic numbers. I mean, if I go to synagogue, I go to shul, and one day, and I'm like, there's more people than I usually see, and someone's like, oh, how many were there? I have
yeah,
no
no clue,
idea,
no clue.
dude. I'm like, there was like 75 people. And my wife would be like, what are you crazy? 75 people? There's like 30 people. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like yeah, you're right. We have we have a very hard time perceiving or, having getting our finger on the pulse of accurate numbers when it comes to numbers, I guess, or numbers in real life as opposed to just concepts.
Yeah, and then like to further it, it's like okay, maybe we're kind of bad at numbers, and then it's sort of like, and also we're kind of bad at relating the breakpoints of two numbers. So if we're talking like the statistic of like unhappiness with public schools, it's sort of like okay, well what would a good number be versus what is a realistic number, and also like maybe it's not cynicism potentially it depends like case by case. It's not cynicism that's making in this case like the GSS survey of the American public telling us that like people are less happy with public schools. It could be because we have a higher standard for public schools that they're not missing, or because people don't understand what that standard could
That's so interesting, right? There's too
yeah
many factors, potential factors that are involved in this.
yeah like the obviously like we do what we can with the statistics we have, and like learning to
Right.
understand statistics is like there's a reason that it's like graduate level work in every single field, and like because it is just that complicated to understand a statistic, especially contextual to like really basic fundamental like how things are counted. And so in this way, it's sort of like, obviously this is telling us something. And we could sit here and we could talk about one of maybe 10 things that that number is telling us. And then it's sort of like, okay, but now that we've like gone through this exercise, like, what are we supposed to do about it? So like, if we take a step back, it's like, okay, so if I'm a cynical person, which I've been accused of being on a number of,
Okay.
I've been accused maybe of being,
Do you think you're cynical?
um, no, I think I'm like nth level skeptical. Like around, like at home, they call me like the skeptical one. Like everything anyone says, I'm like, oh, maybe, I don't know. Like that's a stretch. Like, are
That's
you
not
completely
cynical.
wild? No?
That's not cynical though, because you immediately denouncing it would be cynical.
Yeah,
Skeptical would be to examine different aspects, like what you just did with this survey, and say, like that's called skepticism. It's not saying no. It's saying, well, what else could it be, or how does it work? And they're very
yeah.
different things. It's not negative, but it's not inherently negative. It's the way that you choose to apply it.
I think that I agree with you, and I think that describing me as skeptical is an extremely accurate thing. I just think that like almost like that proves the point, right? Like because to someone else they can look so similar, right? Especially when someone's very emotionally invested in a topic, because my skepticism about their whatever, literally any topic, that
Sure,
they're really
it's a
emotionally
threat.
yeah, it is without any other things, it can so easily be taken. And I'm not even saying this is inaccurate necessarily, but like, it can so easily be taken as like a denouncement of either their feelings or like the truth of what they're saying, right? So if someone says a statistic around wow, I really don't want to get like super political or racist or sexist or anything, but I
Sure,
have a really hard time not thinking of examples, so I'm just gonna go there. If someone says like an example about like women's divorce rate or something like that, like when women like how often people get divorced, and you're like, oh, what's the divorce rate between when men ask for the divorce and when women ask for the divorce? Like, listen, that information only tells you so much, but like people will immediately be like, oh, like you're blaming women, and it's like, no, I'm absolutely not doing that. Zero part of me is doing that. I'm just trying to understand this concept and what we're talking about better, right? Like I want to know what you're trying to say. I want you to know what I'm trying to say. I want to like it comes from like a for me like a place of like profound curiosity where like anyone says anything and I'm like, "Oh, I wonder about that."
yeah,
And
yeah. By the
it
way,
comes
so
across like
you go ahead.
dismissed.
Sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
you cut out. What was the last thing you said? The last sentence. I'm sorry, you cut
Oh, I
out.
just said it comes across as like very dismissive. Like rather than like go
But
all the
it's
way.
not. I've never thought. Whenever you and I have had a conversation, and you've ever asked any question about anything that I've said, or like kind of like delved in, or asked me to elaborate, or said maybe it could be this. I've never taken it as like an attack, like because I mean, and I actually think that disposition has a lot to do with this as well. Like you don't have, I don't, I mean, not to me at least, you don't have an aggressive, angry, attacking disposition. You have a warm, friendly, curious person, like a vibe that you give off that when you ask me these questions, I might get perplexed because I haven't either I haven't thought about it, I'm not prepared to answer the question, or because I just don't know, and so
Yeah,
and so I think that
or because
yeah.
you do know, and you're like, oh, you must not know this thing that I know, which answers this question easily and immediately.
Yeah, but I wouldn't get upset about that.
Yeah. Well,
Meaning,
like,
if I was truly confident, and then you asked me something, and just because you wanted to know more, right? For example, if I just something completely subjective about my life, right? I'm like, I tend to be, I get energy from being around people, and you ask me like, oh, what do you think it has to do with? Or like you like question that, or you say, oh, you don't get tired or whatever, or whenever you're like it's 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, I don't know, whatever kind of follow up question that you might ask that's looking to understand further, right? I I'm not if I'm really confident in that, I don't look at your question as a threat. I look at your question as an elaboration. And by the way, the way that you present the question also makes a world of a difference, right? And you cut someone off, or you're yelling at them, or you have you kind of give off a tense body language, whatever it is. That's a totally different feeling than, hey man, like I'm really curious, tell me why tell me why you think this. And like even just this way that I just presented that cynicism, those stats about like the net, or these general stats about the way you feel about things, and you tell me they could be about different things. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm not threatened because I'm not emotionally attached to these ideas, and at the end of the day, I am just trying to get down to just to the roots of understanding why we, why we are where we are in the world, and so questioning it and trying to really understand it on a more intricate level isn't a threat. It's productive. It's a benefit. It's a good thing. I love it.
I mean, I agree with you. I was just watching a movie last night called Truth, which is about like Dan Rather's like investigation into like Bush's time served in the National Guard or National Air Force, and it's like a very politically charged thing, and but like the undertone of this movie, which is like written, which is based on a book that was written by the producer, and it's a great movie. You should watch it. But
What's it
it's
on?
where did I see it? I saw it. It was like on YouTube TV, so like I don't know, some channel.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah, sure.
but there's this almost like romanticism of like investigative journalism, which like is I don't like it speaks so on like the juxtaposition of me having just watched this movie and us having this conversation right now is like feels very like prescribed, but like it is like it connects so well for me. Like it's just like the curiosity of like truth and not the indictment of like whatever other truths or lies or inaccuracies. Like it's not about that. It's just about like what actually happened. I'm not trying to tell you how to feel about what happened. I just want to know like is this true or not true? And it's just like that level of of caring about that, of just like, oh, I just want to know about this, is so it's somehow like you framed it in such a like a deeply non like it's clear that it's very personal, but it's also clear that like your like emotional like stability is not hung up on like any given aspect of it, and I think that's like potentially what makes it easier for you to hear what I'm saying. I mean, you know me and you know how I speak and stuff, but there's this like very like iconic story of my past where I was hosting like a Shabbos meal, like a Saturday potluck,
Yeah.
and and it was like me and like I don't know 10 people, and like probably 8 or 9 of them were like people who I already knew, and someone had brought a friend who I didn't know. Very common, happy to have them. And we were in the middle of this meal, and I was full blast yelling about some nonsense thing that doesn't matter. Like if I'm guessing, I can't remember what it was. It was probably about food because I have like a lot of really unimportant, strong opinions about food. And partway into me yelling about this thing, this random stranger who doesn't know anything about me was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what I did to like offend you or whatever, but like I just like don't know why I'm being screamed at right now. And like thankfully I was in a room with people who know me because they could jump up and be like, this is just like how he talks, and like we're not like clearly that was like it was like bad for you, but like we promise it's not like a personal thing. And I was like,
Right.
oh, I accidentally like screamed at this person about something that like totally doesn't
Well,
matter. And it's just like, oh, this person did not read this as like honest curiosity for for like their opinion versus my opinion, and like this like honest discourse around. Like they view this as like a full on attack, and I was like, okay, fine, like respect. I'm like a large man. Like if a large man is screaming at you, like that could be somewhat unnerving for sure. Um,
yeah. So
but
funny. It's
yeah,
so funny. Yeah. Well, it's right. So that's why I said that like there's two. So I really believe that there's two aspects to it, right? There's the people that don't like being questioned at all. Like don't like I have a perspective. Don't please don't do anything to kind of do any to impact that perspective at all. That's one aspect, and then the other is kind of based on the mood that you're feeling, or the vibes that you're getting from the individual that you're interacting with, right? And so so for myself, um, I have I'm someone that I've just I've been my perspective and my thoughts and my view on things has been broken and shattered and proven wrong so many times that I'm so willing to just hear it because I know that there's so much that I don't know, right? That I'm willing to just say like, and I'm always like even like religiously, like for example, right, which is just one of the things religiously. I've had my philosophy of Judaism, or the purpose of religion, or the purpose of the concept of God and the purpose of, Torah or whatever it is, shattered and rebuilt so many times because I was just open minded to just hearing like, how is the evidence or how does this argument compare to what I have to say and do what I think until now, and how does what I think hold up to it? And I'm like, oh crap, this doesn't hold up like at all, but it also matters the way that you do it, right? Like, and I say, my dad and I work together, and my dad is someone that is he's a product of a very, very, very vehement divorce. And to this day, both my grandparents are remarried for 30 years, and they still hate each other, right? Like their lives objectively are like good, and they've moved on, and like they're remarried and they're happy, and they just hate each other, and they just take digs at each other, and they just can't stand being in the same room as one another, and and so my dad does not respond to confrontation well. So I had to learn the nuance of, like, if something happens at work, if I react by getting annoyed or mad at him or yelling at him or getting frustrated on the phone, raising my voice, or just like increasing the tension, he shuts down. And so I know that when I deal with him or when I talk to him, when I'm trying to get a point across, that there's a certain way of doing it. Like, I have to say, listen, I don't want to fight with you. I love you. I love working with you. But we have to figure something that you have to figure out how to acknowledge this because it's not good for either of us. And so, like, there's different. So I think that the general, like, way to kind of change, like to help people along that path, you have to be both willing to change, to be hearing another perspective that might be more accurate than yours or might be more grounded in reality, and you also have to find a way to present it in a way that the person is willing to hear it. And it's really hard to do that with strangers because you don't know how any stranger is going to react to any given thing you say, right? Um, but I think that the more that the people are just aware that these two conditions exist in order to have a successful, fruitful, intelligent, and emotional conversation, the more that people realize this, the healthier we're going to be about it. I just don't know how realistic it is to expect everyone to have both those senses in mind all the time.
Yeah, it's funny because look, as you were saying it, I was also relating it back to this like lack of like more casual community, whatever term we're going to use for it. And it's just like I just don't know like how someone feels about something or how their day has been going, and like it's tough to step into that situation and
Hmm.
and and put yourself out there in whatever way you might be doing, right? Obviously different ways are easier and harder, but like um it's just such a like, because I'm not like trying to upset this person who I who I like barely know is there potentially. I'm just trying to whatever move about the world in whatever way I can, and like I've asked either and like, oh, I'm at the checkout line and I'm like, oh, how was your day? And then the person like is like, I can't believe I shoot you that look that's like, I can't believe you're making me talk to you, versus the person who's like, oh my god, I'm being treated like a human and not like a scanning machine. And it's just like, you don't know when you step up, like if you are making someone's day worse by saying the exact same sentence in the exact same tone, or making it better. And just like, it's I'm not blaming the people who are having bad days, but there has to be some accountability for like giving grace to the other person. Like you're saying, like that their intent was not to like ruin your day, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I don't. I just it seems like you're saying, like it just seems like a really cynical way to walk through the world to be like,
Right, right, right. So what I think that we all and I think, by the way, we all get this, where there is the first notion to the relationship where you kind of feel someone out, right? Like, and it could be very, very subtle and very nuanced. For example, like, I'll start by just giving someone like a little smile, right? And if I see that they return the smile, and that's all it is. Like, it doesn't require any kind of abrasive or brash interactions or anything that will be like potentially upsetting. And like, guess what? If you don't like my smiling in your direction, like, or give you like a little like what's up, then like, okay, I'll move on with my life, and like no one's hurt. Who gives a crap? But like, I think that body language and nuance has a lot to do with it. Someone I give someone a little bit of a smile, and they say, a lot of times they'll even initiate, "How are you?" when I give them a smile. And then I'll say, okay, this person is obviously receptive to some kind of potentially superficial, maybe even longer interaction. Um, and I'll go on and I'll continue. And if they don't return it, I'm not going to push, I'm not going to push for that. So I think that, listen, human beings, I think, especially because, especially since we're babies, we learn to read. We learn to read the room. We learn to read people's expressions. My 1.5-year-old knows when I'm not happy. Like he can tell when he does something wrong, and whether he chooses to respond to it or not, like he sees that I'm doing something wrong, and then he'll either go somewhere else and continue doing what he's doing, or he'll stop because he just knows. He knows Abba's upset right now. He knows that like he doesn't like that I'm doing that, so I'm just going to go to another room and do it. But we've been conditioned that the way that we learn, we're interactive, we're social. We read expression, we read body language, we read tension, we read all that stuff. I don't know if it's so beyond our capabilities to do such a thing when we're interacting with people and trying to get, trying to establish something new or not.
I to me, there's a clash between the like two of the last two things you said because, um, like there's an underlying confidence is a kind of the right word, but it's not right. Like your ability to say, I'm I'm prepared to change my belief in this thing if presented with like evidence in the right way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and yet you like your interaction with someone being like obviously okay. Let's take a step back.
Well, that initial point is already far into, or already relatively far into an interaction. I'm not getting to a conversation with someone about changing my beliefs about, let's say, left versus right. About religious or not religious, about God or no God, about socialist or communist or whatever it is. I don't care. But I'm not getting into that until I've already established some kind of relationship that did require my sense of reading the room to begin with. Like you don't just jump into that topic. You have that generally is a little further along, and you already have some kind of established relationship before you get into those ideas where you have to change your mind or not.
No, yeah, that's a good point. And honestly, I think a lot of people could learn from that that like it's not I just met you. It's not the time or space for me to try to change some like your one of your like core beliefs. Um, yeah, like that doesn't somehow that's like a huge kind of like somehow that's like a huge new idea for a lot of people. Like, oh, I actually don't know anything about you, but you're screaming at me with a sign. Like that's never changed my mind because you're holding the sign. I don't care what it's about. Like, um, uh, yeah. So to me, I was thinking more like I don't know any. I'm not like what, I don't even know what kind of historian or scientist you'd have to be to like really be able to speak on the subject to like massive grain of salt. But like I remember younger, I was reading something about smiling and how like to me smiling is like almost exclusively a positive thing. Like it's a positive way, but like in reality, like biologically or evolutionarily like primates use it in like a multitude of ways, which likely means that we use it in a multitude of ways in terms of like showing aggression versus showing submission versus showing dominance versus showing like all of these different things. So like to me like it's almost like not a given that some what I think for a lot of people is like very basic human interaction is actually telling the thing I want it to, oh, like even if it's not on purpose to them or to me, and like that level of like maybe that's like a little bit too deep into the like yeah whatever.
No, I think you're right. I don't think you're wrong, but I think that more accompanies a smile. For example, if I want to let my students know, I'm like, listen, I teach part time, right? And I don't do it because I need to teach. I do it because I really, really love it, and I really think it's important. I really think it's valuable, and because I have that mindset, it's very, very, very difficult for my students to get under my skin because I know that I don't have to be there if I didn't want to be there. I don't have to deal with this shit if I didn't want to, if I didn't want to deal with this shit. And I know that it's all part of what I want to do, right? So it's very, very difficult for my students to upset me. And so a lot of students will be acting out or say something or do something. And like they'll look at me and they know that 95% of the other teachers that they've had in their lives lose their shit about what they just did. And I'll just smile at them and be like, listen, man, like, you can leave my classroom now, but like you're not going to get me angry. I don't really care, right? And so my smile is more of a dismissive sign, or more of a sign of dominance than it is a sign of like camaraderie at that point, right? Like I smile and I'm like, I don't change my tone, I don't change my body language, I don't change anything. I'm just like, listen, like, like you don't have to be here if you don't want. You can go and take a zero for the day, but like you're not going to ruin my mood. I want to be here because I want to be here. And but but I think that there's more factors to just a smile or not a smile. Like when you when you meet someone that's interested in talking to you, you can tell that they're interested in talking to you. I think there's more than just a smile or not that's a telltale sign, right? How engaged are they? How tense is their body? How relaxed is their body? Are they nodding along with what you're saying? Are they shaking their head, or are they looking at you? Or are they looking around and just not paying attention to like just looking at surroundings? And and I think that there's so many more factors other than just that allow people to kind of read, like, okay, this guy's smiling and like maybe he means well, but like despite the fact that he's smiling, he's not looking at me. He's looking at the street sign to when they're winding across and counting down the seconds to when the light changes to walk sign. You know, that person, even though he's smiling, doesn't really mean it. But again, humanity is so complicated and so complex that um, and I really, I try to give people benefit of the doubt, and I really want to believe, and I really do. I think I do believe. I think I do, but I'm not positive. I think I do believe that people are better than what we give them credit for at social interactions and reading other people. I really, really want to believe it, and I think that the only time that we're really not is when we're not face to face, right? Why do people say things on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram that they would never in a million years say to another human being to their face? Because you don't have all the social nuance that we've spent millions of years, or hundreds of thousands of years developing as primates to learn community, and we just strip that away in just a second. It's crazy.
But it's the muscle thing. Like I agree with everything you said. In addition, like there's still that aspect of the muscle. There's still that aspect that like as much as like simultaneously, I think you are right that we give people not enough credit for their ability to function socially, and we also give them too much credit because like once you're in the weeds, it's so individual. It's so individual to the person. Like obviously, like there's a range of like average, normal, expected behaviors for this or that or whatever group, and how we go about. And I think just like remembering that level of complexity, if remembering that level of complexity allows you to take a step back and be like, maybe they didn't mean it as offensively as it did. Or maybe, right, like, maybe it's not like, okay, I smiled at them and they looked away because maybe they read my smile wrong, or maybe they want nothing to do with me, or maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe 1,000 reasons. I'm never going to know. And just be okay with that, right? Like, just understand
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know in this situation, and not let it throw you off to the degree that like sometimes it can. There's this crazy story that happened to me this week, and I was like, I immediately after it happened, I sent a voice note to Zach. I was like, I have to say this story out loud to like process that this just happened. So I'm driving back from the grocery store, and I'm pulling into this apartment complex, which has like probably 10 speed bumps. Like there's so many speed bumps for no reason. And I have groceries in the back, and because I've packed groceries before, I put the eggs on top, which turned out to be a mistake because at some point while I was driving, I turned and the eggs fell over. So now I'm sitting there like, I don't know if these eggs are broken. And I don't know if if I drive like faster over these speed bumps, if I'm going to break them more. So I get to the first speed bump with a stop sign, and I stop, and there's like a golf cart and a jogger, and so I'm like going pretty slowly over it, and then I'm going up the hill, and there's another speed bump, and the person coming from a side street like takes a sharp left and cuts me off, even though I have the right of way, and I'm like, okay, well I was already going very slowly because of the speed bump, so I'm basically at a full stop at that point. And I keep going, and whatever, like it's maybe like 2 blocks of total distance through this small apartment complex, and as I'm like turning my way towards like the exact building that I'm going to, I noticed that like, oh, there's this person, they're really close to me, they're right behind me, and I'm like, oh, that's like, I don't love it, like it's kind of crazy this person is even going to the same place as I'm going. Like this apartment complex isn't that small, and I was like a little nervous, and I get to where I'm going, and I park, and the person drives by, and I'm like, oh, that's so weird, because where are they going? Because if they were trying to go to a place down there, like like, why are they following me this closely? And I get out of my car, and the person has turned around, and they are now screaming at me in the parking lot that I
No way.
need to learn how to drive, and I don't know how to go over speed bumps, and I was just like, I was so shocked in that moment that I could not respond. And like now, if you ask me like how would you respond to that, I give you like four answers that were not what I did. But what I did is I said back to them, I was like, "What did you want me to do differently?" Like there was pedestrians, there was there speed bumps. Like of course I went slowly over them. I'm sorry I didn't go at exactly the pace that you wanted me to go. Like I got cut off at one point. Like what is happening right now? And they're like, you're am I allowed to swear? Can I swear on this?
Sure, please.
They're like,
Fuck.
they're like, they're like, you suck at driving. You have to learn how to drive. You're a bitch. And then we were driving off, and my response was, "You were screaming at me in the parking lot," and they had like already started to drive off, and they reversed back towards me, and I was like, "Oh God!" Like, and they were like, okay. So I repeated it because I was not thinking straight. And this person was like, if I had hit you, it would have been your fault. And I'm like, that is logically and legally untrue. Like if you're riding my tail and I short stop for any reason, especially for a real reason, like you're 100% on the hook. And if you had seen me go over the first of the 10 speed bumps too slowly, like give me more space if you think I'm an erratic bad driver. Like it was so illogical to me. And then they like drove off really quickly, and I was just like, this person took like. I don't care how slow I was driving. They took more time out of their day to like pull up to me and scream at me. And like, if I had been thinking, I would have just said, this is a crazy person or a person who's having a terrible day. And like for whatever reason, they want to take it out on me. And I just would have like let it roll off my back. But I wasn't thinking straight because being followed through a parking lot's like a somewhat unnerving experience.
It's definitely unnerving.
And also like this is the South, and like in the South, like people carry weapons here. It's not an like,
Dude, dude, after I'm sorry, I went after October 7th, and every Jewish mom in Hollywood
yeah,
bought a
no,
gun.
yes,
My
everyone.
my chances of getting inadvertently killed went up skyrocketed. Because I go to my friend's house. If I go to my friend's house and their wives don't know I'm coming over, I'll get shot in the leg. I get shot in the stomach. I don't know.
Yeah,
Because like everyone is armed to the teeth here. But yeah, anyway, continue.
and it's so like, and there's like so much to unpack with this thing. But it to me it comes to this experience of just like, if in the moment I could have remembered that I don't know anything about this person except for that they're upset at me for doing this thing, which they clearly don't fully understand for any number of reasons, I just would have said, I'm sorry that I did this. I will try to do a better job next time, even though like I don't mean it. I'm not sorry, and I won't
Yeah.
do a better job next time. Like this is how I drive, and I'm gonna do it exactly the same the next time because I'm not trying to hit anyone. And if that's how slow I have to drive to do it, like it's over a speed bump in like I don't know what the speed limit is, but like we're in a residential apartment complex. Like the speed limit's probably like 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, right? Like it's not fast. And I was just like, but this person felt the need to scream at me, and I was just like, you know what? Afterward, I could let it go. But at the moment, I was so floored. I was so like, what is happening to me? Like,
How long? Can I ask you a question? How long? Because if I had that happened to me, if I whenever I had any kind of like, I'm not a very confrontational person, and if I am confrontational, it tends to be more intellectually and like based on the conversation or like like something where it's almost like well-meaning. For example, if I were to argue with someone about like something like Judaism, something like some Jewish law or something about I don't know, even something social, some social stupidity or government stupidity. Like for example, I really, I don't agree with everything he says, but I loved RFK, right? And like if someone wants to have a conversation with me about like why I liked him and why I didn't like him or what I agree or what I disagree with, like you can have a confrontational conversation, but like at the end of the day, the point of the conversation is to kind of just like get, like try to understand something. But when something just happens out of just pure like frustration or anger, or like kind of rationality is removed based on the emotions, I end up like I end up completely adrenaline. I end up like adrenaline shocked. Like I'm pumped up with adrenaline. I'm kind of like, and I think about it for like I'm kind of like pumped up for anywhere from like minutes to maybe even hours after, right? anything that kind of goes beyond what like I feel like I'm mentally capable or intellectually capable of handling. I kind of just get all like I get I get tense. I'm in protective mode. I'm getting attacked and I need to protect myself. How long? What did you experience when that was happening, and how long did that last after?
Like a while. Like I was
I can imagine.
immediately I sent the voice note to Zach, and then I forwarded it to another friend of mine, and then I typed it out to a group message of friends of mine, um, and then I was like, okay, I have now like functionally like thought this thing through 3 times, and I like responded to the messages that were coming back and forth. Like people were like, oh, like give me details about this, like that you didn't say, and things like that. And I was like, oh, I know I'm gonna tell this story to my mom later. So like there were like some, so like I knew I had like a certain amount of processing, but then I was also about to go to the gym, and I was like, well, what if I see this person in the gym? So then I was thinking about that, and like it was like a solid, it was probably for the first like 20 minutes of my workout, it was all of the fuel. I was fully burning off this like what the heck just happened to me, like all that energy from obviously like I wasn't like really shaking, but like the shakenness of it, I was just like fully.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, you're really thrown into a very, very uncomfortable confrontational situation. And the comedian Ari Shafir.
Yeah, funny dude.
So like he has a bit in his Jew stand up where he goes, I think because I don't do impressions, so I think I got the Jewish soul. Like, and like he's like it's so right. Like whenever we're confronted like by anything like anything potentially threatening, we're like I don't know what to do with myself right now, and it's so funny because it's kind of true, but I and then you have, of course, you have, the people that are like really, and I don't really know too many people like that, and it really floors me and astounds me when I see them. But the people that respond to aggression with aggression, right? Like they'll get right back in your face. My brother-in-law is like that, and like if someone tries shit or if someone starts something up with him, he is so quick to just get in your face and it's the same protective measure, right? As in like one protective measure is to say, okay, I'm backing away to not engage, and another protective measure is to say, I'm gonna get in your face and I'm gonna shut this down by making you intimidated, by telling you that you don't want to continue engaging, you're not gonna bully me around. You know, I don't have that. And I'm 6'4", 200 pounds, dude. I mean, I'm not, I'm not a small, scary person. And actually, that generally comes to my benefit because people don't know how much of a wimp I am. That if they see me walking, if anyone wants to, if anyone looked at me, I give off a, you're not going to just pick a fight with a 6'4", 200 pound person, right? But if they actually saw how how unwilling I was to engage in any kind of serious confrontation, then I would be in big trouble by this point.
No, it's funny because I feel like I exist at the extremes of this because I definitely have been confronted and been like, absolutely not, you're not yelling. Like if you're gonna yell at me, I'm gonna yell at you, and I'm also,
Yeah, you will.
yeah, and I'm a big guy, right? Like, um, and it is an intimidating thing to be right, from the story from earlier, right? Like, and that was not even
Yeah.
intentional. Like, and this instance was like a solid middle ground for me, which was so weird because usually I'm like, I'm gonna run or like get in my car or like just be like, I'm sorry, and run away, or I'm gonna be like, get out of here, like what are you doing, like leave, please leave, but
Yeah.
louder and scarier. And this was me being like, I really didn't think I did anything wrong, like please, please leave me alone. um and it was just such a funny experience, and in such a weird like, and like after I got the chance to process this, and like I'm not traumatized by this, thankfully. It's just like, oh, now this is just like a funny story I'm getting to retell, and like it is just like part of the human experience and part of like dealing with people, and like I can only hope, like I wish no ill will upon this person. I can only hope that like they told this story later and they found peace in it in some way. I sincerely doubt that, but like probably they're talking to their friend about the story and they're like, and this guy sucked at driving, and it was
Yeah,
so
exactly, dude. I never. If I were the driver and you were doing that, I would never give you any kind of benefit of the doubt. eggs in your trunk? Fuck that, dude. You know, this guy's driving like a douchebag. You know,
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
guy this guy
I,
sucks at driving, and I need to tell him that. He needs to know.
so I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go that far, but I would get like I can't like I would complain about it. You know, I'd complain about it. What you I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this, and maybe I want to hear your thoughts on this because you are a very well traveled individual that spends a lot of time in a lot of different places. What are your thoughts on the people that live in like quote unquote out of town or suburbs or like outside of big, you know, rural areas like Manhattan, as opposed to being in it? Because like right now, for example, like you're Zach, you know, you've been Zach Doing for what, a year or two at this
Yeah,
point,
we're going on 3, going strong.
going on 3 years. But within that time frame, like you spent a lot of time being in Atlanta, being in Seattle, being in like these, you know, quote unquote smaller, you know, smaller places. What are your what are your thoughts on the differences between the, you know, a place like Manhattan, which is like the epitome of city life, as opposed to a place like Atlanta or Florida or Washington or something like that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts about how different those places are. So there's certain things. Let's start with like some of my thoughts on Manhattan. So first of all, like it is so accessible. You can walk, you can subway, you can Uber, you can, and like because of the density of people, like the amount of certain things that exist is just like it's outsized to like the nth degree. Like it's crazy how much more. Like if I if I wanted to find pick up like frisbee or soccer or something in Atlanta, like first of all, I definitely need a car. I have to drive there. Second of all, like there's probably a lot less of it than there is in New York. That's not always true, but like it's like harder to find. There's like a little bit more obvious like intention around like where to go for those things. And there's just like so many people trying to do stuff in New York. Um, and I think that's in stark contrast to certain other things. Like I'm a big beer drinker. I love beer. I love craft breweries. New York has like it has bars that you can go to, which are like they've gathered a bunch of like craft beer to that one spot, and that's great. But like they're not brewing it there. There's like maybe like two in all of actual Manhattan, and then there's some like far away, and like those places are infinitely difficult to get to. And there's just certain things where it's like we have so many people, and we
By the way, there's
don't have
incredible breweries in Brooklyn and Queens and all those places, but I
yeah
just can't imagine how like Finback or Grimm or all these places. But like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know how you're gonna. I, don't, I it's
So
what does
Brooklyn
it take? What does it take for you to get to like Queens or Brooklyn? You
yeah,
know?
like an hour plus. It's not always that's not always true. Sometimes it's 45 minutes or something like that. But like it is there's no like this thing I'm talking about where like I could walk like I live in the Upper West Side. So I live like less than a 10-minute walk from Riverside Park and Central Park, right? So like I can go to so many places. I am not even 10 blocks away from a movie theater. I'm not 20 blocks away from like world-class museum like and yet for me to get like craft beer from the people who are brewing it, I have to go 50 minutes. In a lot of ways, like 50 minutes just isn't that much, but like contextual to the rest of my life where I'm on foot and I go to the grocery store, it's a block and a half away, right? Like it's so far. And to get to, especially if I want to go to a specific one, like if I want to get to like Coney Island Brewing, it's like an hour and a half plus for me to get there. If I want to go to like Threes or Other Half or some of these other Brooklyn breweries,
I love other half.
it's a great beer. Like, but usually something has to happen. Like I've like other when my beer friends come to town and they're like, "Hey, I want to grab a beer with you." I'm like, "Well, we could go to one of these places, which will have like a good variety for us, or we could like make the trek out." And some of this is like the Manhattan attitude that you develop, where you're like, Brooklyn is far, even though like I live in Atlanta and I drive 40 plus minutes to get to beer all the time. I've been to probably
Yeah,
30 breweries in the greater Atlanta area. I've been out to Athens. Like I've been,
Athens has some good breweries, right?
yeah, Creature Comfort
What's
and
in Athens
Terrapin.
again?
Yeah,
Terrapin, right? What's the
yeah.
other one? Oh,
Creature
something
Creature Comfort.
Creature Comfort. Yes. That's right. I've
And
heard about.
these are
I haven't had any of the beers yet, but I heard great things.
oh really good. They like Tropicalia, which is like one of their canned beers, solid, just so solid. Um, yeah, I could talk about breweries forever in their specificity. It was interesting
It's
because
so crazy you haven't been down here, dude. Because
I
I
know.
literally within 15 minutes of my house, I literally have 4 or 5 breweries that you would adore. Like they're just because they've got variety, but they do like, they want to make it as well as they could, and like they do, like they really do an incredible job. You know, like it's such a shame you got to get down here because
We'll find time. We'll find time.
One of the pleasures in life is sharing experiences with people that enjoy it as well, right?
Yes.
It's such an
Uh,
important aspect of community in life. Like we're like when you go to a brewery or someone that hasn't been to a brewery before, and you walk in and you got a flight, you got a couple of beers on tap, and you're like, and you know that they're gonna love it, and you watch them take their first, and like even watching like a comedy special. I showed my friend a Kevin Hart bit last night, and like I got so much pleasure out of watching him laugh at the parts that I thought was funny. Like it's validation, and it's comfort, and it's community, and it's sharing all at one time. Like
yeah, it's
it's
awesome.
such an incredible feeling.
I will come and drink beer with you. I promise.
Okay, great.
But these are some of like, and so for me, a lot of like what hits immediately different. Well, obviously is like these things where it's just like, what don't I get to do because I live in New York? Like what certain things? So like I find New York is a very difficult place to have like consistent week to week scheduling in. Sorry, it's a very easy place to have consistent week to week scheduling in, but it makes it very hard to do spontaneous things because for me to go to Brooklyn and make sure that I'm getting back in time to go to sleep to have like a normal day the next day and all those other things, like that's just not the way that I live my life. And I'm sure there are people who live in New York who do that. But like for a lot of people I know, like going to a Broadway show is amazing and it's great and it totally throws their entire week off. Especially if like they played the lottery and they won the tickets that day and now they're canceling their plans from later in the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or now they're figuring out what they're doing for dinner instead of what they thought that, right? Like there's a lot of things like that. And the pace of life like facilitates that. Whereas in other places, like just feel like everything's moving a little bit slower. And so when things come along, like you're not running. So when something like falls over in your way, you're like, okay, well, I'm walking, so I'll just avoid this or I'll go over this or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and then the other big one, because you mentioned Seattle, is like access to nature in New York. Like Central Park's great. I love Central Park. I'm there all the time. That doesn't count for me. Like that's not enough
I
nature.
hate, I hate when people say New York has nature. I'm like, you mean like upstate New York where you drive like several hours out of Manhattan? Or are you talking about like your stupid little park? Like, what are you talking about? And by the way, not to diss Central Park. I love Central Park and the way that it exists for a city like Manhattan is probably the best that a place as concentrated as Manhattan. It's probably the best and most effective park that a place like Manhattan could create, right? Like it's done as well as it could be, but it does not substitute for what Seattle's nature is, or what Oregon's nature is, or what even Maine's nature is, or Jersey, for God's sake. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's not. It's funny because like if you go into like the annals of history and you look at um, like the squirrel, like the gray squirrel that's everywhere, used to be considered like the pinnacle of nature because they sort of only existed in like deep forest and like they
Yeah.
brought them to Manhattan on purpose because they were like we got to get people like crave nature so like we're gonna like bring
Get him a squirrel.
squirrels here and then like they died because like there weren't parks and it didn't work and it was like and so they brought them so once they built parks and the whole idea of like how to relate to nature and like what parks look like changed, they brought them back and then they thrived and now they're a problem um but like it's just like the context with which we view nature and like understand like how our spaces are like facilitating that nature, like I'm not ignorant to it. Like Central Park's great. It's way better than not having Central Park. Anyone who lives in the parts of Manhattan which don't have access to parks, although there's a lot of little ones all over the place, like I feel bad for them. But like when you're in Seattle and from basically everywhere that you are, you can look up and see the mountain and see Mount Rainier. And when you're like
Yeah.
40 minutes away from like insane hikes, just such good hiking and great beer. It's like, yeah, like I just don't know how like it's one of those things I'm like, I live in New York. I don't know how long I'm gonna live there. I'm excited when I get to leave New York to move to a place which gives me access to these other things because those things are like I know that I'm missing them and I they're so good. They're so fun.
Do you have an idea of where you'd want to potentially live in the future outside Manhattan?
Um no, not really. Yeah, I don't know. I also like I think it's a bit of a fool's errand. I think people get like a little bit too excited about this prospect because hypothetically if you move somewhere it might be with a significant other in which case like their opinion is extremely relevant and
Yeah,
also
sure.
like you don't necessarily know what you don't know about like moving to a place so like I am extremely well traveled when it comes to the United States, especially, and I like like you were
What are
talking
some of
about.
your favorite places? What are some of your favorite places in the States?
Um, that's a great
Some
question.
like the places that like you just enjoy being. Like I love Colorado. I love Colorado, right? I love the state of Washington. I can't. I could imagine living in both those places very easily. Um, I love Jersey, actually. I know it's weird. I love New Jersey. There's something about there's something about it, and I will. And I've never really been pushed to like articulate it. And I bet that if I was, then I could probably come up with some kind of coherent reason why I love it so much. But I love Jersey. I
On your
love
next
Col.
episode, you have to describe to whoever your guest is why you love Jersey. You're being given homework. Like you have to go
Yeah,
and be like,
seriously.
I was told I have to do this thought
I think
exercise.
it's more emotional. It's got to be emotional. It's got to be emotional. It's got to be that like there's so many aspects of my life that are so positive, that are so rooted in Jersey. Whether it's where I went to high school, where I had the best experiences, or whether it's whether I, the like, the people the friends that I've had that have lived there, or Bruce Springsteen, who has like really one of the most monumental impacts on my entire life. Just loves that. Just like he breathes that place in his poetry. Or my professor that got me to be an English major and like changed my life single handedly. Writes. He's from Elizabeth. Um, there's something incredibly romantic and nostalgic. I feel, and I'm so curious. I don't even know how this happens. I feel nostalgic about events that I have not participated in myself, which is a very interesting experience for me. Like I've been a Springsteen fan for years, right? 2018, I discovered his music, right? What happened was my uncle had passed away, and I just got a record player. And my grandfather gave me his record collection because he knew that I had a record player. And I had a bunch of weird music, which I looked at now, years later. It turns out it was the Grateful Dead, which I'm a huge fan of now, so that's great. And and all this cool psychedelic, hippie music. But one of the albums caught my eye, and it was a Springsteen record, right? And it was Born to Run, and it was just an all white album with this guy with this white scraggly looking guy with a guitar leaning on a huge black guy who's holding a saxophone, and they just look like they're having the best time in the world. And I'm like, okay, I'll play this record. And like the second that I put the record on, I just fell in love with his music. Right? It just spoke to me. It spoke to my insecurities. It spoke to what I was going through in life. It spoke to
Oh, it was speaking to your insecurities, and then it cut
hello,
out.
hello? Yeah, we got cut off. Yeah, it spoke to my insecurities, and then it gave me hope that I could do more, and then it gave me, and then I learned about poetry, about a hometown and a love hate relationship, and trying to discover yourself, and all these amazing things, and it had an enormous impact on the rest of my life. I wouldn't have moved to Seattle if I didn't listen to his music. I would have been afraid to leave. I would have been insecure. I would have been like, I don't know, I can't. I've never been here before. I don't know what I could do. And like he saved my life like in an enormous way, and I have like an enormous debt of gratitude to the emotional vulnerability and his ability to capture both in words and music what his feelings are, what his feelings about life are. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm a huge music buff. Um, as far as I'm concerned, I think he's the greatest singer songwriter like that's alive. Like Bob Dylan, who I also love, is incredible, but he's a little bit too. He's nonlinear. He's like postmodern nonlinear almost, like with his poetry. And while his poetry is like incredible, and I can't fathom coming up with anything he did, like Springsteen has his finger on the pulse of what the human condition is. And each of his records, from Born to Run, to The Darkness of the Edge of Town, to The River, to Born in the US, to Nebraska, to Born in the USA. Like those records go through the stages in life that like the average, the regular American, that every American goes through, and puts all the positive and negative emotion and everything in between into words and music in a way that so speaks to the human condition. It's just it's breathtaking. Um, and he's Jersey based, and so like just between growing up, my old relationships, old friends, old schools, and then this like come together like to culminate into this place called New Jersey, which is like known as like the underdog and the armpit of the war of the America, but like it's really just like the warm armpit that's it's kind of that has soul and humanity and life in it is just it's to me there's something so symbolic and even religious and spiritual to it. It's strange.
Um, that was awesome. It's funny because I am definitely a bigger Bob Dylan fan than I am Springsteen fan. But like you're saying about like the shared experiences thing, like one of my like weekly rituals is that I pick an album that I've never listened to start to finish on either a band I maybe only know one song of or something that I listen to
No
all the
way, you
time.
do that?
Yeah,
That's
and I've listened to
incredible.
a lot. It's amazing. I'm like a huge like I think obviously more recent music they're not necessarily constructing their albums with the same level of care that they did back in the day when like you had a record and skipping songs was a totally different game and like the whole thing was like a different experience and like so sometimes older albums like it feels more like in like it's more value added there um but now okay so now you have to tell me I don't think I've ever. I have to look back on my list. I don't think I've ever done a Springsteen album start to finish. So I'm only going to do one. Which album, start to finish? I listen to it start to finish in order every day for the whole week. So which album should I do?
You gotta so the reason why I think you have to so the reason why I think you have to do Born to Run is because Springsteen was known, in my opinion, it was known, it's not even my opinion, it's a lot of people's opinions, um, to be primarily a performer, right? And his studio work does not reflect his performance on stage. There's something that was emergent about his relationship to the audience and his relationship to playing with a band in front of a crowd that you just can't take away from, right? And so when people are Springsteen nuts, they don't listen to Springsteen studio albums, just like the Grateful Dead don't listen to the studio albums. Even Bob Dylan, right? Bob Dylan, like if you go to Bob Dylan's Spotify or Apple Music page, it's a lot. It's hundreds and hundreds of hours of bootleg live performances, different variations of the song that he played, right? If you were to pick a studio album, the one that's most true to his performance, it's the best made one, is Born to Run, where you listen cover to cover, just blows you away. Born to Run is absolutely the studio album to listen to. But so he goes through stages and he goes through stages in his albums, right? Born to Run is the story of a young man or a young human being, a young American that feels trapped in the hometown or the day-to-day life that they're from, but they know that they have all this potential and all this life within them, and they're just exploding out of it. And it's just the entire world is just at my fingertips, and the world is a blank page, and it's waiting for me just to write all over it. And it doesn't make a difference what I say. It's just waiting for me to write on it. And that's the message of Born to Run. It's like almost like a young man's eager world to open in front of them adventure. And then Darkness at the Edge of Town, which I related to at a different point in my life. And I would actually listen, if I were to tell you to listen to Darkness, I'd tell you to listen to like a live concert from that tour, would be the story of being an adult and having responsibilities, and the world crushing you, your responsibilities in the world around you crushing you to the point where you feel like you might potentially lose yourself and lose your sense of like who you are. and then the album is split between songs of being broken and anthems of hope, and anthems of I'm gonna get past this, and tomorrow, and I swear on my life I'm gonna break out as tomorrow is gonna be the day that everything that I've ever dreamed of is gonna happen, and like you can make it through just one more day. Like that's Darkest to the Edge of Town, and it's incredible. And then there's The River, which talks about relationships and marriage, and it talks about the different aspects of like the positive and the negatives, and stale relationships, healthy relationships, guilt in that relationship isn't as good as it could be, or or just the absolute infatuation of first being in a relationship and falling in love with someone, and it's much more relationship oriented, and it really so like each album speaks to a different point in the human being's career, and he wrote them over the course from the time he was 22 to the time that he was 35 or almost 40. He was coming out with these albums. So 50, the 15 or 20 most formative years in a regular human being's life, he really captured the essence of the experience that they're going through as an American, or as a modern, as a human being, kind of making their way through the world. So in terms of the music, just as the music plays, best studio album to listen to, Born to Run is like without a question like the album to listen to every day of the week. But depending on what point in life you're in, the lyrics and the music will mean something will mean something different to you. Born to Run doesn't speak to me the same way now when I'm married, moving into my house, and have a 1.5-year-old. Doggers at the Edge of Town, or The River might, which is about marriage and relationships, might have a little bit more, might speak to me a little bit more as a human being than than that initial album. That's really what I feel about it. I feel very strongly about it, and I think that I really, really, really think that he is like he's the America's poet. Like he's America's spirit in many, many ways. I don't think it's an under exaggeration.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because sometimes I'll get into a conversation with my mom, who's a big music person also, um, and we'll be talking about, let's say, Springsteen, and I'll feel like like I'll feel like I don't know it well enough, right? Because of what you're saying, like because of like the more profound, deeper parts of like what it speaks to at like a national scale almost. And then I'm like, I know this stuff okay, and I know that there are people our age who know this stuff better than me, but there's a lot of people we know who, if you said Bruce Springsteen, they'd be like, we don't know who that is. And
Yeah,
it's just like,
dude,
wow.
majority of them.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
And it's, yeah, it's a shame. It really is. It's such a bummer.
It's a shame because I think that you know what, I'm actually curious what you think about this. I mentioned this to Sam the other day too, but I was listening to. I'm sure you've heard of Eric Weinstein.
Yeah.
So he was talking about the fact that we have today, because the way that social media kind of has emerged and the way that it operates, we have very little that's like sacred, and very little that's like culturally, emotionally vulnerable, and it's something that like we can like point to be like the voices of our generation, like in a way that like really encapsulates like what America's feeling like, and like really since I think a lot since maybe I'd even go as far back as like 2010 or 15 or so, right? Where like you have like as far as the arts and humanities go, right? Like, or where the creative aspects of life, where like you'll have like Creedence Clearwater Revival, John Fogerty, like he captured the mood and the essence of the nation, about the perspective, a lot of people's perspective on the Vietnam War, and the anti-establishment movement in his music, that not only was incredible music, but like had like reflected a heartbeat of what the young nation really felt at that time. And because everything is kind of made fun of, or memed, or mocked, or or just passing news, it's very, very difficult for anyone to kind of be the voice of a generation. I would say that the closest version we have of that, and I don't know how much it really reflects what our culture thinks or experiences, would be like Taylor Swift. Would be like the cultural phenomenon of like from 2010 or 15 till today, right? Um, like like she has amassed like this following that is like America's going to look back in 20 years from now, 30 years from now, like Taylor Swift was like an incredible just artist and performer, and spoke to millions and millions and millions of people that just followed her relentlessly, and that just got her right. There's something about her that has her finger on the pulse. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that you would I think if you compared like Taylor Swift to and Taylor Swift fans to like the Dead and Deadheads, it's a lot easier to see that comparison than any other artist
you
since
think
I've
we're the
been
dead?
alive.
Really? You think? Do you think that?
I think yeah, I think that it's more comparable. I do just because of like the way that people are so excited about it, and like the proliferation of like the music is everywhere, and like people will go. I have friends who will like fly multiple times a year, like the a number of like rip off cover bands. Like I think in 30 years we'll be like, yeah, this is it. Like this is she's somehow both the like the Springsteen and Deadhead of our time. Like she's the whole thing, like the whole
So
package.
I'm not versed enough.
And I just yeah.
Does she have her finger on the pulse of like what American culture and like the world and society is, you think? Like in that sense that, Springsteen or Dylan or even the Dead who are like they were the Dead were like stubbornly apolitical, not political, and the Dead were stubbornly, anti-establishment. But that refusal to have a stance was their stance, right? And like people related to that. Like we don't have to play your games. Like we just want to have a good. Like we just want to live an emotionally fulfilling and creatively fulfilling lifestyle, and like that's what we're going to do, and and fuck everything else because we're not involved in that. You think that she has her finger on the pulse in that sense, like the Dead or Springsteen or Dylan did?
I do. If not, like I'm not like the biggest Taylor Swift fan, like personally, but I don't want any of her fans to come out of the woodwork and kill me for having said that. But like I had like when her tour went around and everybody was talking about it all the time, and I was like, well, I've heard this on the radio a bunch, and I had a bunch of friends who were going. I was like, I went to a few of them, and I was like, I'm super not versed in this. Make me like a Spotify playlist that's like. I was like, each of you can only put in like 5 songs, and then they revolted. They were like, five's not enough. So I think they each put in 10 songs. I had a few friends put together a playlist to like try to get me to be able to understand like the like some of the magnitude of her work and the breadth of her work. And so I have like some experience with this, very intentional experience, and like I do think to a degree that is also like you see the fans and like that helps to push it home, but like to a degree that is like I just don't even know like who's the next closest artist to Taylor Swift since the year 2000. Like I literally can't think of anyone. Like I cannot think of somebody who I feel amassed this, where it didn't feel like the fans weren't more of like a stereotype than not. Like I was like a
But
big
what's the
Disturbed.
message? What's the cultural like symbolic like symbol that she manifests?
What do you mean? Like would you argue that Springsteen manifested like a single symbol?
Yeah, I would. I would say that he represented the everyday common American working man trying to navigate the hardships of the world. Absolutely. Like that is what Springsteen is. Springsteen is every single person that is not that does not they do not have and by the way, it doesn't even relate to wealth or not because it's so much more. It's an emotional journey. Anyone that feels lost about their life, anyone that feels like they don't know where their place is, and they're determined and how they're determined to discover their place, and and whether or not it's achievable. That's like that is the theme of Springsteen. Like I'm trying to discover myself in this American story, and can I carve my place or not? Is that done? That's Springsteen's place. Bob Dylan's is a little bit more. It kind of changes based on the era. So I don't know if he has one common theme, I would say, throughout his life like that. And then the Dead, again, are the anti-establishment collective experience that just humanity is what humanity needs humanity, and that's the priority, and all this, bureaucracy, and all this government, and all this, the formal way of living is just a bunch of bullshit that we're going to just cut through, and that's what so many, and that's why I think so many people related to is like, yeah, man, like I just want to live. I just want a good relationship with my neighbor. I just want to hang out with people. I just want to express myself and find a way to express myself that's truly uniquely me. And that's why like the Dead have, you could like, yeah, people rip on Deadheads for being, druggies or whatever it is, but you have established incredible professors that are listening to the music, and you have lawyers that are listening to music, and you have doctors that are listening, and artists, and like everyone, like the message of let's let's cut through the bullshit and be ourselves and like express ourselves in a loving way with just like coming together. That's something that spoke to a nation, that had that clear message. I don't, and I'm not saying that Taylor Swift doesn't have one. I just don't know what it is. Like, what is the
So
message
obviously, I like
that
as previously so as previously stated, I'm not an expert, right? Like, and I won't profess to be. But one of the things that I think she does is I think that she captures a lot of like aspects in of America as it relates to like uh like like some of these shared experiences, right? Like and specifically the reason I think that she's lasted as long as she have is that as her shared experiences have changed, and like everybody's relationship with some of these things that she's talked about are just so profoundly different in like a much smaller period of time. Like dating has changed so dramatically over the time that she's been making music, that when she comes out with a different song that relates to that, it's so personal to people who are like I
so it's
also have this
vulnerability. It's vulnerability.
relate to this thing. um yeah, and I think there's an authenticity and a vulnerability to it that reads to so many people like in this way of like she puts words to how we feel about really complex like Americanism, and even in certain aspects like globalism and globalization as it's related in the last 25 years relative to, I mean, 25 years is probably a little bit too long, but whatever, 15
Right.
years
25 years is
relative to like
2000, dude. It's been global. It's
yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it? But like globalization's been going
yeah,
on for a long time.
relative to her music and how her music like and how so many Americans feel, so like there's so much feelings for Americans about like how like where they fit in the world and how they relate to the world at large and how decisions are made in that relationship, that like even in things that aren't just her, like that aren't just specifically her music. I think it works, and I think it's deeply personal. So I think that like when you have like the global scale of what she does and thinks and puts music out to, but somehow it still feels like it's personal to you,
Yeah.
it's very like, which I think is, again, I think that aspect is a little bit more generic to like, well, yeah, you're just describing like how a famous person works. Like if a famous person is doing something that they're the only one that cares about, like, yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere, right? But I think it's about like there's some level of vulnerability. There's some level of like emotional communication, and also like the part of the story of her career is like basically is like she touched so many different genres, and she opened up those genres to so many people who would have otherwise been closed off to them, whether it's like aspects of pop or aspects of country or et cetera, and how she just like shifted from one to the other. And I think that like that's another aspect that speaks to this, right? Like a lot of these bands that I listen to, that a lot of people listen to, like they're one genre, like, and they do interesting things, and they manage to stay like somewhat fresh to their fans. But like she managed to like not just be fresh, but like to an entire audience of people be like, and now I'm going to get you to look at all of this entire like to broaden your scope and your mind in a way that like is so different from so many other
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
from so many other people. So I think, and again, like I'm not an expert, but in my limited capacity, like
Right.
these are some of the things that I see, and I'm sure that like if you Google like why do people care about Taylor Swift, there's like probably academic articles that have written about
Definitely,
this.
dude. I've daydreamed. I've dreamed about giving college classes on Springsteen and Dylan and the Dead. Dude, I can give semesters worth of classes about these guys, and like
Do it,
what they
do
represent,
it.
dude. I can't. The reason that's not true. I can't. I can. I'm not going to because I'm not going to get a master's degree just to give a stupid class on Bruce Springsteen. I could do it online for free, or I could do whatever, But I'm not going to. I and this is a whole nother rabbit hole that I don't want to go. I don't want to start to go down now, but we can go into the next podcast we do, which is the inflated value of academia in today's world. Um, which is pretty crazy. But
I have really strong opinions about that. So we could
I'm
do
so
that.
excited, dude. I'm so excited to hear about that because I really feel like I don't know. I mean, like there's got to be a way to like test someone's knowledge and someone's charisma and someone's personality. I was saying, hey, you need to spend another $150,000 in 3 years of school. When you're already supporting a family and paying a mortgage and like doing whatever that like, in order to be able to teach, a generation. Like, what are you talking about? But forget about that. I don't want to get too sidetracked. But yeah, I mean, so the other thing about Taylor Swift that I was that while you're talking come to mind was I went with my wife last year to a Creedence concert. It wasn't really Creedence, it was John Fogerty, but he's famous for writing all the music for Creedence Clearwater Revival, right? Who'll Stop the Rain, Fortunate Son, Down in the Corner, all these incredible like American anthems, and um, and I'm listening to the concert, and I'm like, this guy hasn't written, like, this guy's not performing a song that he wrote within the last 60 years of his life. Like all his music came from 1967 to 1971 or 72. Like maybe he has a single every here and there for the subsequent 30 years. But I was like, what's this guy been doing for 50 years or 60 years that like he's obviously brilliant, he's obviously creative, he's obviously incredibly talented. Like what's he doing? And I think one of the incredible things about Taylor Swift is that like she doesn't like she could retire tomorrow at I don't know how old she is, I'd say in her 30s. I don't even know how old she is, but she could retire tomorrow with a catalog bigger than most people have their entire, most musicians and famous musicians have their entire lives, but she can just keep, but the creative output is just overwhelming. And I think that's something else that I think she deserves a lot of respect and credit for. It's like and I don't know why it's so interesting that it became a thing, and maybe it's just on my Twitter feed based on my algorithm, but people are like hating on Taylor Swift, and I can't understand for my life like why anyone would just dislike her. Like she's talented, she's an incredible performer, and she's not lazy. She's clearly not lazy if she's putting out music every year or two albums a year or whatever crazy number it is that she's doing. And like you got there's so much value, even if you like. Let's say you don't agree with whatever political stance she takes, right? Don't you think there's an incredible value to saying, I'm not content with the fact that I already have 15 albums, that I already have, dozens of hits, but I have so much creative potential and energy that I'm just going to keep on putting it out and keep on working at it, and I'm not going to be complacent with and just satisfied with what I have so far. I want to keep on going. That's an incredibly admirable thing, in my opinion. And like,
Yeah,
I,
I
I
mean, it's also incredible that she has enough. She hasn't, like, sometimes this isn't always true, but sometimes with these famous artists, like it's not just that they don't have the creative energy, it's that like they don't have any more like problems or insight into a world that they can or will write about, that they cannot be poetic about their new set of problems, which is one of the most impressive things about Springsteen, as you were stating, but also like it's apparently true about Taylor Swift, that like as she grows in fame and relevance, she is not she's not just like writing about nothing that nobody cares about. That's just like, oh, but the music is good enough that like
Yeah,
we can dig
she's
into it.
keeping her finger on the pulse of her
Yeah.
life.
And I think that I'm not like the most well versed person with Credence, but like it's one of those things that you can look and you can be like, this person didn't, they chose not to write, or they couldn't write about like more recent things. And then at the same time, there's an aspect which is that like it's still relevant. Like some of these things just have.
Yeah,
It's always. I was reading like Dr. King's book a while ago, and I was like, this is so unnerving about how much of this could have been written like in the last like 5 years.
yeah.
Like
Because it
it's
speaks to the human
so
condition. It doesn't speak to a cultural condition. It speaks to a human condition, which I think is
yeah
really important. The back and forth between power and desire for control and desire to, the word oppression is very charged now, but even just in the grammatical definition of just someone being under someone else's rule and wanting to escape it, and like, yeah, when you say oppression, today it has a lot of cultural, stigma that goes with it. But you can be, I mean, listen, you and I both have plenty of friends that are quote unquote oppressed by their jobs, that they just have no lives because the corporate jobs suffocate and squeeze all the humanity and life out of them, and like, and when they listen to something that says, I'm breaking free and I'm going to live, and like, that's something that didn't have to exist when you're being drafted to the Vietnam War. It can be something that you have to work this soul sucking job to afford your $4,000 a month rent in Manhattan. I mean, like, it's crazy, and so it's a human condition kind of thing that keeps it relevant, I think.
Yes, and I think that aside from the music itself changing, some of these ideas sometimes you hear like I think counterculture and like and what that looked like in the '70s versus like what that looked like in like the '90s with like punk rock and stuff like that, and then how like that becomes a culture and all that well explored thing. You can sometimes just be like, if this band changed the music and played these lyrics, we wouldn't have been able, like we would have just thought this was the like, they're talking about literally the same things in very similar ways, like. Um, just maybe more angsty sounding for some than others. And obviously there's the nostalgic aspect, like the music I listened to when I was growing up. I'm sure I'll like it forever, even if it wasn't that good or it doesn't feel that relevant. But like it will always speak to that for me because of the nostalgia of it. But then there's the things beyond that just go, yeah. But it also still speaks to me in the emotional capacities that it can.
Sure, sure. Yesterday, for example, I in the last couple of days, so I just moved into a new house. I closed my first. Thank you very much. It's very exciting, but it's also like I haven't had a chance to really talk this out, and I haven't gotten a chance to really go too deep into this. But on one hand, it's incredibly, incredibly, there's incredible relief. On the other hand, it's almost like a now what kind of thing. Like, like you wait for this like incredible moment for your life, and you're like, okay, well, here I am, and like, kind of now what do I do with it, right? And and I haven't had the chance to completely unpack that. But things have been crazy just getting the house settled in, and we've been having guests nonstop, and we've been having problems that you have to fix, exterminator and HVAC and plumbing and all these kind of things, and it's been like overwhelming because aside from keeping the house functioning house, you have all these problems, and then I have two jobs. So yesterday, it's been very overwhelming, and yesterday I was like, what, like I'm going to teach two classes. I'm not as prepared as I could be because I really feel like being a teacher is an enormous responsibility. And I don't, and people could look at it like, okay, like, like all you have to do is keep kids occupied for 40 minutes, but like there's an enormous responsibility to shape and mold and help develop young minds, right? Forget about mold. I don't even want to, because I don't even like to do that. Like, I don't like to tell anyone what to think. I like to help them think for themselves. Um,
What
and
ages
yeah. Hello?
what ages do you?
10th grade, right? This year. Last year was ninth, 10th, 11th. This year is two 10th grade classes. And I have a free period that I hope to use as a guidance counselor in between the two classes that I teach. But
No, you gotta offer the Springsteen class. That's what you gotta do.
yeah, Yeah, dude, not in Torres Chaim, not in the ultra orthodox all boys school. I don't think so. But so yesterday, so I played a song in class, "Father and Son" by Cat Stevens, which I don't know if you know. It's actually is in the Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I think.
I'm
But
familiar.
yeah, and it's this incredible song that's about the dynamic between a father, aside from a father and a son, like the feeling of the sense that that both care tremendously about one another, and there's a miscommunication as to how they have the healthiest relationship. Right, the father's trying to give the son advice. The son feels like he never gets a chance to even express himself and communicate, and his father doesn't understand how he feels. And the father's crying because he sees the son about to make the mistakes that he already knows he's going to make. And we were talking a lot about the human condition between fathers and sons. And like that that song that was written, I think in 70 or either 69, 70 or 71, is like the year's 2024, dude. Like I'm teaching 14-year-olds, and we're talking about their relationship to their parents and the feeling of, the moment from the moment I could talk, I was ordered to listen, and like I have no, like I feel like I have no voice in my life, and I feel like I just need some kind of outlet, some kind of expression, and and the students, dude. I mean, there were 10 kids, from yeshiva, Orthodox Jewish guys, and they're sitting there, and you could tell they're locked in, and like they feel like this guy seems to have gotten what I feel. And I was talking to them because the way that this got started was I was saying how valuable. Um, I was saying that there are certain things that don't change, about humanity, and don't change about people. That like that when you capture something, there's something about the human essence that's just there, and then if and when you hear it played in a song, or you hear it discussed, or you hear it articulated, then you realize that it's been a part of you that was always there, and now you're aware of it, and now you can respond to it. And we're talking about vulnerability, we're talking about relationships to family, we're talking about relationships to parents that were unsettled or settled, or how they felt hurt, or what they could do about it. And and I don't know that they'll ever, that they would have ever heard about that or thought about that or articulated that if Cat Stevens hadn't written that song. And it's such an incredible, like that is like an example, I think, of the enormous power of the arts, of culture, of music. That there's a part of you that you didn't even know existed, and then when you become aware of it or conscious of it, then it becomes one of the most important aspects of your life, and then it just helps define who you are, and you didn't even realize it could have been there to begin with.
Yes, I think that looking to when someone says something that's like profoundly true and you hear it and you're like, I could have I felt that, and I've never been able to structure how to say this thing. Like talking about feelings can be really hard. What the language of what we have and what we like to describe it, and especially for negative things. Like it's so hard to talk about um like these because they're complicated and they're not exclusively negative, and like and you're just like, how do I say this? And then when music is, I think, probably the most common place where someone can find poetry, perhaps, or maybe books, where you can find this like nugget, this like one sentence that you're like, this is it, like this one sentence or this 2-minute song or this whatever. Like they're short, they're really short, and you're like, this is a simplification, but this is what it is. This is that nugget of wisdom that yeah, like that. Those are so powerful, and they're so. Um, and when you find them, and you find someone who's putting them out, you're like, I want, like, oh, let me see hear more of this person's music, so I can potentially get more of these nuggets of
Yes,
wisdom that
yes.
really speak to me in this way. And I think like when you were talking earlier about like the right time in your life to be hearing some of these things, and obviously most of these things are like they're true enough. Like you can listen to the stuff about fathers and sons when you're experiencing challenges with your father, but you could also listen to it when you're experiencing challenges with your son. So like
Yeah.
it's not like limited. It's not like if you don't listen to this on the exact right day, it will be meaningless to you or something like that. But in terms of just like that processing and the processing power that it gives you, it's unparalleled. And I think having access to teachers who think like you do, who are like I'm like it's just like I this thing I have reverence for this field. And for what I'm doing, like is an extremely valuable thing because uh, uh, it gives you the ability to go and do this thing. I mean, I don't know if this was intentional, but like there's a aspect of like diversity, like rhetoric that you're touching on, where it's sort of like, but if it wasn't you, then like that no other teacher in the school is going to say what you said,
Yeah,
because
that, and I
they
think that's
have.
an enormous problem. I think it's, and I don't know. I've been trying to brainstorm, dude. I've been trying to brainstorm. How do we incentivize or create value that the best people will want to be teachers, right? Like I consider myself one of the fortunate absolute minority of people that my life aligned in a certain way that is so uncommon, that is so unlikely, where I can work remote and I can work from home. And the way that my wife's life is structured and my son's life is structured, and the way that that my income is structured, that I can take 2 hours or 3 hours a day and teach kids. But if that didn't align, I would never be a teacher. These kids would never have. And I'm not calling myself a good teacher. I don't. I'm not organized. I have a lot of things that I have to work on. I'm far from a perfect teacher. I pride myself on trying to capture part of what it's great about English class is that it's so subjective that you can like just it's humanities essentially, right? Like it's just anything that I feel like covering. But like but so many great people that would be teachers just don't get to be, and we're so much worse off without them. Like I'm only teaching 20 kids this year. I'm only teaching 20 kids. Like I wish that there were teachers that were charismatic and that were thoughtful and that realized the consequence and the significance of being an educator and what that means for our world and what that means for our country, what that means for our future. That will say, I've got to do it. Like I have to do it. It's so important and it's such a good use of my time and it's such a healthy investment in my life and the life of the world around and like the world around me. And I don't know what to do to help people realize that, and to help the people that would like, all the people that be the best teachers have have better opportunity, financial at least opportunities to be doing other things that will make them more money. And we're losing, and kids of tomorrow are losing out because of that. I feel like, and maybe, and by the way, this is something again I'm very happy to be wrong about, and I'm very happy to be corrected on. So your skepticism on anything I'm just saying right now comes into play. I would love to hear just a pushback, because I want to get this down to. I do want to get this down to a coherent statement or a thought or idea where where that's reinforceable.
Yeah. So my mom's been a high school educator for 30 something years. Yeah. So I'm biased. So I'll throw that out there. I'm also like I have a master's degree. I put a ton of value into school, even like college and like even like expensive school. Uh, so and I do think that what you're saying is happening. I actually think that what is happening is that we rely on people just knowing in their bones how important this thing is, and they make so many sacrifices, financial and otherwise, in order to do it. And obviously, there's people who are there are bad teachers out there, and like systems which perpetuate various issues with bad teachers, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but I do think that like the only reason it's even working as well as it is because there's like a bunch of people who are like, I'm gonna do this, despite like in the face of, because I know it is so important.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sacrifice and
You
like
have to be a martyr or an idiot to be a teacher
yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah. Or you have to be like or you have to be like incentivized in the wrong for the wrong thing. Oh, I love that I get the summer off, and it's like, no, that's good. It is good that you enjoy that. That's not a reason to be a teacher, though.
Right.
Um, and you'll quickly realize that like your job's too hard, or you're just like not doing a good job. And like I'm not sure we're gonna solve for like the critical mass of people who are bad at their jobs that exists everywhere. But I do think like personally for me, I just think it's like it's just a I'm fully prepared to be like, the amount of added benefit of having better teachers is so astronomically large and impossible to actually nail down as like a single number, that like we have to like I just believe that system works, for any number of reasons. So like I just think that like you could just justify paying teachers like an inordinate like a significant enough amount of money to take people who could do things in other spaces and make them teachers. Theoretically, like obviously, like I don't really know that you're gonna step in and like fix the U.S. education system and by like throwing money at it. Like I just,
Yeah, yeah. Throwing money at a problem usually is not. So it's usually not the
but it
solution.
is. But in this case, it is by virtue of the fact that like if let's say that there are 100 best mathematicians at teaching, right? Obviously, like teaching and doing certain things aren't necessarily like they're not one to one. They're not necessarily one to one. They're 100% not one to one. So like the person who is the best at the ability to explain mathematics to the next generation of people who can do stuff with mathematics, if you took half of the best of those and you gave them enough money that they could possibly go into teaching, or if you took the 100 best educators and you put them in positions to help the whatever the 200 to 300 best mathematicians so that you could like agglomerate like a better system across the board, like you would 100% have a better system because you would be taking the people who were, and obviously like maybe the benefit that they would be providing from doing whatever job they would have been doing if they weren't doing that teaching was greater than the teaching, but that's like there's an infinite amount of potential value added from a teacher. It's literally infinite, right? Like
Right.
because if they can create 10 people who are now going to do 30% of what they would have done, they've potentially just outpaced their own ability to uh, hack the system at a scale which is like unfathomably
Yeah,
large, right?
yeah.
Um, so like I think a good like from a really practical like nitty gritty perspective, if you had a better system for taking, first of all, if our retirement system was better, then you could. But if you had a better system for taking a retired person who is very, very good at certain things and training them in the aspects of teaching that are a little bit more like structural, right? Like maybe they're very, very good mathematicians, but like they don't understand how to like work with students who aren't brilliant mathematicians or who are struggling with this or that, or classroom management, like all this skill set that has nothing to do with like knowledge in an area, right? It's like if we're balancing knowledge in an area with that skill set, and you can take either people with that skill set and give them knowledge in the area, or you can take people in the area and give them that skill set, then you could make a better system. One of my most impactful high school teachers was he was an engineer for Bell South for like a really long time. He was very smart and very professional in the way that he did things. And one of the reasons he was so impactful to me is because he just did things very differently than other teachers because he was like much more of like a corporate attitude and background. And it would have been bad if all of the teachers were like that because lots of students could not learn from this guy. And I learned way better from him than I did from certain other teachers. And so, like obviously one size doesn't fit all, but he had this full career in engineering, and then he went back to teach high school math as part of his retirement plan.
Yeah.
Was like
But you
a
can't,
certain
but
amount.
do you think that you can wait for these people to live careers and then decide that they're going to go teach? Like, it by the way, some of the best teachers are those type of people, right? For sure. I'm not disagreeing, with the premise at all. But the notion that teachers that are going to be the best teachers have to live a full career or lives, prior to them becoming these incredible teachers. It's just not, I don't know how many of those are going to be. How many do you
Well, I
have?
don't think you're going to get a solution that's going to be like, for lack of a better term, like one-stop shop in that way, right? Like one aspect of this won't solve the whole massive system of issues, right? Because um, we just don't. Uh, you can sit here and point out like maybe the math doesn't work, maybe there aren't enough retirement age people who could still
Yeah,
teach, or
right.
maybe like, the generational turnover, right? Like presumably if any of the doomsayers about like the amount of boomers who are retiring are to be believed, we will have plenty of qualified
Yeah,
people
sure.
at least contemporary. But I said that very dismissively. That is a real problem that does exist in this country. Uh
So,
but
yeah, finish your
so
thought.
like I don't think it's a one stop shop solution, but there's I think this is a piece of it, and another piece of it is like train teachers better and teach teachers more, right? And pay them more, right? Like it just you can't get away from the fact that like if a teacher is making, if I could be making, I'll use myself as an example. I would love to teach, but they make so little money, and I grew up in an environment where teachers were making so little money, and I was like, they don't have enough. They don't have enough money, and the only reason I was like able to succeed anywhere near whatever by whatever metric you're talking about is because like a nonsense number of volunteers in extremely giving communities that I grew
Yeah,
up in.
yeah,
So, like, how do we tap those things to make all schools that way? Interesting question. Interesting. Like, should we have to do that? How do we do that? For sure, that's part of the solution. But also, like, um, we just have this like if I could be making like, and it's not near it. Like I am a urban planner undergrad, GIS graduate, and my most recent job was in data engineering. And the reason my career has progressed the way that it has is because they different basically doing the same thing for a different company or with a different title but the same actual workload would pay me like tens of like 10 20 30% more than I was making. And it's just like it's so difficult to have that to have that opportunity and go, I'm going to do this anyway, especially when you're uh, positioned with the idea that like I could give so much of that money away and I would probably be doing more good than if I individually went into the
yeah,
classroom and did
yeah.
the work. So like it is really complicated on how to make those decisions. But I know for myself personally, when I look at and I just go, but they just make so relatively little money
Yeah.
that why would like how can I justify like doing that when it's just personal sacrifice at that point, right? It's like I'm not selfless enough. And again, I think there's a strong argument that like I shouldn't have to be. It shouldn't have to be that like I view
Right.
being
You shouldn't have to be a martyr to make the world a better place. Like the
yeah.
world should value the fact that you're making it better and compensate you accordingly. But what I, the other thing that I was thinking while you're saying all this and what I've been thinking for a long time since I started teaching was that there are a lot of industries that started off it started off in a similar boat as this is, which is like you didn't go in just to make a lot of money, and it was kind of like relatively safe, and then someone came along and they revolutionized the industry in a way that allowed them to create a lot more money and a lot more value out of it, right? And it's happened with a lot of people, a lot of things. It happens with accountants. It happened with mortgage traders. You have cases all over nearly every culture and every industry where it was a fine place to work or it was a regular place to work, and someone came along and someone thought of something in a different way, and they just shifted it culturally, and they made one shift. They looked at it from a different perspective, and then all of a sudden it became a cash machine, and the rest of the world that were intelligent and competent and eager and impassioned and enthusiastic joined that world, right? Like investment banking wasn't always what investment banking is today. You know, someone found a way to turn it into the cash machine that it is, and now you have mathematicians, and now you have science majors, and now you have economic majors, and now you have business majors that are all competing for these jobs because someone shifted something along the way that found a way to make money. I think that could exist for teaching, that you can increase the way that teachers make money. I don't know how out of the box. And while you were thinking, the only thing that I was potentially thinking of was kind of like the same way that information is kind of being democratized today, like through independent media, right? If I read something, I personally, I read most of the news that I get are from podcasts and Twitter. I never go to legacy media, to find out what's going on in the world anymore. I just don't. Like I'll find like I'll have there'll be a Twitter independent journalists. There'll be podcasts that are that, and I really it's funny because I'm definitely not left, and I'm definitely not right, and I definitely like if the year was 1970 or 1975, I would definitely be on the left, and and I don't know how much that world actually exists anymore. So I'm very, very balanced about the news that I consume, and I'm very skeptical about the news that I consume. But just like news and media has been democratized, maybe one of the ways that you can incentivize being a teacher is that if students could learn online, or people are willing to pay more for someone that is just a really, really good teacher that just puts information, that puts their classes and puts their lessons and puts their information out on, out online in the free world, that you just get paid based on how many people find what you have to say valuable, then that can lead to an explosion in the educational system. Like we don't have, like we know that the best way
but
that
but
the
we
kid, yeah,
but we have like various forms of that, and like I'm not saying
we
the issue is that
do,
like
we do
we're
have
we're
various
so-
forms. Go ahead.
we're solving for like a vagity, right? Like what do we actually want to get done, right? Like what is school, and what is education, and like what do
Right.
we actually
Kids are not, I
try?
don't think kids are meant to sit in a classroom for 9 hours a day. Like I don't think that they learn the best that way. They
Correct,
don't,
but
yeah.
but if we're saying we need students to have, or we're saying the problem is that school does, you can't optimize for one thing when school does six things, right? Like let's use masterclass as one of the examples of something that you're talking about. Well, first of
Right.
all, masterclass is opted into, and second of all, like nobody is actually holding masterclass accountable for like accomplishing anything. It just has to have a perceived accomplishment, and hypothetically, when it comes to the economics of it, like it doesn't actually have to make anyone more money. It just has to provide them with enough perceived value to be worth it, and it could just not be worth it, right? So like 20 years from now, people could just be like, well, this masterclass was garbage, or like I bought this and never used it. I mean, like I'm sure, much like the gym, I'm sure it has some stats on like people who are gifted it or buy it and then literally never um, right? Like never actually consume it, and even if they do consume it, they like quote unquote learned it, like like by what metric? So like it's these things are very complicated. Like with like well. With students who are like really want to learn, already it's a different game. But like part of the thing we're solving for is like how do you get a group of people who are distinctly different from one another to do something which they don't want to do. So like independent of the fact they don't want to sit in a classroom for 8 hours, like if given the opportunity to like be in the classroom or be free, like a vast majority of kids are just going to pick to do whatever they feel like in any given like moment or
Well,
day.
yes, yes, for sure. But imagine that I agree. I'm not disagreeing by any stretch of the imagination, because I think what you're saying is completely correct. Um, when you have students, for example, right? It's famous Billy Joel line. I learned more from no, it's Billy Joel, it's Springsteen, it's a lot of musicians. We learned more from a 3-minute record than we ever learned in school, right? Like we learned more about the human condition, we learned about more about life, we learned more about what we had to learn about, you know, from that, right? Um, I don't,
Yeah, but
I
some of that is it ties so perfectly into what you were saying about like the willing, like you get caught in the right moment, like you maybe went into that album being told it was like, right, like one of your friends, someone who you trust was like, this is a great album, you're gonna learn a lot from it, um
no,
or like
I
it
discovered all this stuff naturally. By the way, just myself speaking. Like this was like the way I learned about music is, for example, I'll get into, let's say, Springsteen, and then I'll find someone that covers a Springsteen song, and then I'll listen to another song, and then and either it'll catch or it won't catch, and I'll move on or I won't move on, right? The way I found out about the Grateful Dead, I didn't even know about the Grateful Dead. The first time I heard the Grateful Dead was a cover band called Joe Russo's Almost Dead, right? And I was like, oh, and it was a cover of a Springsteen song, right? So I started listening to, so I found a cover of the Springsteen song by a Grateful Dead cover band that also happened to play a Springsteen song. And then I listened to some other songs, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I told a friend about the band. They're like, yeah, dude, they're a Grateful Dead cover band. I'm like, who the hell are the Grateful Dead? And they're like, you don't know who the Grateful Dead are, and you're listening to Joe Russo? It doesn't make any sense, right? I have a very organic like way of like going through these things myself, right, personally. But I think that you can probably teenagers, kids, schools, like, people that you're teaching, and passion is contagious. Enthusiasm is contagious. Love for life and love for learning is contagious. I never thought that I'd be interested in science until I started listening to Andrew Huberman's podcast. You know, like I just didn't think I was good at it. I didn't think I would get it. I didn't think that I was capable of understanding it. And it was presented by passionate, competent, and enthusiastic teachers that in my own way, I'm far more educated today than I've been in my entire life. And it pains me to say that because I know how hard my dad worked to pay for, my parents worked rather, to pay for my tuition, right? You know, high school, college, whatever. And to discover that at 28 years old or 20, almost 29 years old, that I've learned more in the last 2 years from listening to enthusiastic, democratized education is, you know, has been the better way than spending $25,000 to $30,000 a year on a formal school where I sit in a classroom for 9 hours a day or 12 hours a day, whatever it is. Um, I don't want that to be the
Yeah, but
case.
it's it's so right. Like I think somebody who was upset at the school system could hear what you just said and be like, "Oh, right, the school like that's it. It's that simple. The school system doesn't work, etc." And it's like, "No, wait, hold on. Like first of all, you are wiser than you've ever been, and you'll be wiser tomorrow than you've ever been. Second of all, like your ability to know how you learn is fundamentally different. Third of all, like you're electing to do this. So you already are more likely to remember and learn something if you are choosing to engage with it than if you are like forced to. And there's no ramifications for whether or not, like if you chose tomorrow and you were just like, I don't want to learn about this anymore, you just wouldn't. And you wouldn't be walking around with that knowledge, and you would have agreed for, and you would have chosen for yourself that you don't care about that. But like everything I just said is fundamentally different from like the theory and structure of school, right? Like if someone was just like, I don't like math, and it's nobody has figured out how to present this to me in a way. It's not like, and societally we're just okay with this person not understanding math, right? Like, and maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe we should be okay with that. I don't know, but like, it's just such a fundamentally different thing. Like most people in their late 20s can who are curious the way that you are can describe what you're talking about. There's plenty of people who can't, but like most people who like are like, yeah, like I went to a lot of school. I still think I've learned as much in the last 5 years than I did in the 5 years that I was in college and graduate school, aside from maybe the total amount of like minutes I read. But like other than that, it's like, yeah, because I'm choosing things. It's it's much more intentional. I'm like carving out time for that. But if you had asked me when I was 10 to like learn how to read better, I would be like, get out of here. Like the last thing I'm going to do is read. Like I don't want to learn how to read. I don't care about reading. Reading's not important. Like the computer will read to me. I just didn't care. So like it's like immediately caring is already, and your point of like I care because this is interesting and being taught in an interesting way by someone who cares. For sure that's true, but like it's just not true for a classroom worth of people, right? Like if I gave 30 people the podcast that you're listening to and I was like, you have to listen to this podcast, and then also it's important that you actually remember this. I didn't even say I was going to test them. I just said it's important that you remember this. Like they just wouldn't all say what you're saying. Like they 100% wouldn't. Like we're like on an individual basis,
Right.
you could find the right person to teach the right thing.
So do
But
you
if there's any
what do you
requirement,
think about the idea? I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead, finish your thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Any about the requirement?
no, that would um, yeah, if it was a requirement that they actually remember it, like it's already a different thing, right? Like recall and how that works, and how and how we're like structuring education around like the theoretical ability to do that, and how like one thing builds on another, and we know we need to teach you Z, so we have to teach you A. Um, and like when we give up on someone, or like the concept of giving up on someone in the form of like a specific part of education, like all of those things just make this like, to me, like I'm not saying this to be like everything you're saying is wrong, or we don't have to figure out how to be innovative in the teaching
No, I don't
space
think
or
you're
any,
saying that. I don't think you're saying that at
um,
all. You're just you're providing some thought to what I'm saying, which I think is important.
yeah.
What do you think about the notion of of having a heavy emphasis on trade at a younger age, and then providing the opportunity for education as you get older, if that's something that you find valuable or relevant.
I like it in theory. There's just two really big pitfalls for me. The first is that trade is often intensely physical, and that is a very strong limiting factor to the launch.
I think that might be, just to push back a little bit. I think it's a little bit more of a stigma. Like a trade could be sales, a trade could be accounting at this point. Like a trade could be certain, like a trade could be a lot of things that you don't necessarily need. Like, yeah, historically, trade has been labor intensive and, like, very physical and manual and hands on in terms of application. But there are a lot of jobs now, and there's a lot of societal value that could be provided through that doesn't. Listen, you don't need that kind of education. Like for me to do my
Wait,
job today as a
wait,
salesperson.
and the theory, like
Right.
just for clarity. So let's take sales for example, and the idea is just that like earlier than college, where you elect to potentially take courses in sales, in high school they're
Or
just
to
like
start or get an internship in sales or start working in sales, right? Where you're still under your parents' roof, and instead of them paying X amount of money a year for your education, or instead of how about this? Because public school is free, right? Rather than sending your kid to a public school, have your kid go to an office every day where they learn how to make sales, right? And then they say, you know what? It might be important for me to learn this in order. I've been doing this for 6 months. I've been doing this for a year. I've been doing this for 2 years. In order to enhance my skills, I think it's more important. I think it's important for me to take, a year's worth of math, accounting, and marketing, right? And they go ahead and they engage in this education system, or if someone becomes an engineer, right? Or let's say, yeah, ground level engineer, where a lot of because humans, we do know, and I think that I don't know how arguable it is that humans are primarily experiential learners, right? You don't teach a kid how to speak with a dictionary. You teach a kid how to speak through context and through observing conversation and through observing interactions and then soaking that in and then mimicking and replicating it. Like that's the way that human beings have always learned and do learn.
yeah,
And
but
it
you don't
almost goes
you don't get
and
experience in a classroom, right? Like that's not like yes, there's some ways of teaching where they're like memorize this times table and you're like this doesn't make a ton of sense necessarily, but like it's not like in a classroom they can't give you problems which are designed to like a well-designed math problem like is designed to teach you and make you like think through the example given and like the thing that you have is like the thing that you have there that you don't have in like a more like naturally occurring environment is that like I have either laid a trap or I have like given you the piece of knowledge to be able to do this. Whereas like out in the world, like sometimes you're given a problem that like there actually isn't a solution to, or you don't know the solution to, and you don't know that you don't know it. And like that aspect of learning, I think is a little bit harder to hit intentionally in a classroom. I still think it's possible, but like what you're saying is not like agnostic to the truth. It's just what you're saying is just more, it's just more generalized. You're like, I think
yeah,
if we go, I'm not saying
because
I
people,
disagree.
I think that you need a generalized approach for a generalized population. There's a lot of different people out there, and there's a lot of different worlds and a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of things that you and I take for granted. I mean, I don't know about you. I take that back. I don't know about you, that I take for granted, right? About our world and about our country, about our culture, about our society. I take it for granted a bajillion percent, and I know that, and so when I'm saying generalize, I'm saying that because there are far more people. I had an experience with so when I sold my last townhouse that I was living in Orlando, sorry, in Hollywood. I went to Orlando for a month because I was, we wanted to get away. We didn't want to deal with moving our stuff on a temporary, home. We knew we wanted to buy something, but we didn't want to rent and move and schlep everything. So we decided to just rent an Airbnb in Orlando for a month until we figured out what we wanted to do, right? So we moved to Orlando, and I go to Champions Gate, which is a gated community, one of these resort communities that is primarily a vacation place, but also a very popular place for, for people to live full time because it's gated, there's security, you get a nice house for pretty cheap. Generally, the houses that you buy come furnished, so you save a lot of money on that. And then they have a school district, and and it's fine. I mean, it's really good. And I was playing basketball one day, just shooting around on the court, and there's a young kid that comes up and he starts playing with me, and he's, I have a very hard time telling age based on look, but I ask him, how old are you? He goes, oh, I'm 17. Like, so you're a high school junior, senior? He goes, yeah, junior. And it turns out that he works part time when he's not in school with his cousin, and we're just like talking about life and his ambitions, and what, and how, what his perception of school was and what his value on school was. And I know the dangers of cherry picking, one particular example of one person in one place and generalizing the rest of it. And I'm not trying to do that, but this one case happens to be very far removed from any experience that I've ever had in my life, and he's like, like, I just knock door to door, and like, we do like a certain type of install, and like, the education system is so far away from geared to helping him excel, and like what he's accomplishing as just a means to get through day-to-day life for him, that I was like, I felt like I wanted to just like help him. I just wanted to like sit him down and just talk to him about, like, well, like, how many people deals are you closing? Do you get a commission, or is your cousin who you work with paying you a base? Do you have equity? Do you know what that means? Do you know what it means to own part of a company? What percentage? And like, do you guys want to
Yeah,
sell your
but they
company?
don't teach you that as an intern either. Like they don't teach you that anywhere actually.
But don't
I
you
mean,
think?
like,
But don't you think they should?
yeah, but that's, to me, that's not a problem with the structure of education. That's a problem with the content of education, right? Like, I think most of us
So it's
would
both.
argue, no, that's theoretically the structure of learning those things could you can learn things in any number of different ways. And I do like, with what you're saying, like, obviously, like, the logistics behind it being, like, ignoring that for the moment, like, the idea that, like, every kid might need, um I don't really put like a huge value on like childhood, so like that's maybe a good backdrop. But like the idea that like every kid should have this as part of their education is really easy for me to accept, right? Like yes, this would be a good addition, or it's addition by subtraction to some degree, because like if kids are already in school for 7 hours and you're like they're not going to learn anymore if we have them working harder than that. So like yes, take away 2 classes. I don't know what you're going to take away because, but like we're only so good at teaching so many things. But take away 2 classes and give them a whatever, a 3-hour internship twice a week or something like that. Like, I don't know the exact structure of it. Right? Like that's a very easy idea for me to get behind. There's a lot of kids who won't learn anything doing that, and there's a lot of businesses who will like struggle attempting to make that work. But like I'm not gonna, I'm like, yes, that sounds like a great idea. I don't have a problem with that. That's just giving kids more access to more ways of learning. They might figure out things about themselves that they otherwise wouldn't. But I think if you took every kid and you were like, you're 14, go get a job. Like that's how we're gonna teach you. Like
No, no,
first of
no,
all,
no. Well, but you have the opportunity to say, listen, are you a classroom learner, or are you an experiential learner? And I think that both should be an acceptable course for, for an American, for an American kid that's trying to
yeah, but
live the quote unquote American dream.
yeah, but there's just like a lot, like if you take a lot of this has to do with let's break education out into like more nuanced aspects and not like call it all the same thing. Like if I'm remembering my research from grad school, it's been a while. Basically after fifth grade you can more or less, for like a vast majority of people, track like what their academic success is going to be, and that's very early to argue, or through high school, but very early to be able to know that, right? You're basically saying that like this person, what are you in fifth grade, like 11, 10, 10, and you're like
Right.
you're a 10-year old, and based on like how you're doing right now I can more or less know like if you're going to like succeed in high school or fail in high school, and like which aspects of that you are likely to do that with. So it's like, okay, so For the people who are failing, like that probably has something to do with like an early childhood education problem, and like everything after that. Like I could wave away all of middle school and high school education as being like these people aren't set up to succeed well enough at that point. Like we can admonish everything we want to, but for the people who are set up to succeed at that point, often they are succeeding in high school by whatever our definitions of success are. Right. So part of this is that like, well, what are our actual definitions of success as it relates to like the education and what people are walking away with? Fine, agreed. But like, for like right, like I think most of us, I think every single person in our age bracket would argue vehemently that if at some point in high school they would have made us take a class that's just called like taxes, we would be way happier people, right? Like, um, and like I took a class taught by the teacher who I was talking about earlier, which was about money management, where like the basics of like amortization and a budget were talked about, and like to this day I am a better budgeter and better with that, like those aspects of money than basically everybody I know who hasn't like invested serious time into like learning about those things,
Sure.
right? Like, and yeah, I think that class, I'm sure there were some people who wouldn't have learned anything from that class. I learned a lot from that class. Great, good for me. I just think that we're like yes, because it comes down to this individual thing. I do think that like listen, there's some obvious things. The idea that everybody has to go to college, and that the prestige of college is what it is, to me speaks to the fact that we don't think the base education that we're giving in high school is quality enough to walk away and be like, these are enough of actual people that they don't need more of this, right? Like, they like in school you learn to like interact with your peers. Well, apparently you don't learn well enough because people go off to college and they're terrible at interacting with their they're monstrous human beings that like are nothing but like shameful acting people, and you're like, how did you get to be 20 and be this terrible, right? So like and I'm sure you can't get rid of all of that, but like it speaks to some level of like before they got to college, like, or the purpose of how college has changed and things like that. And oh, look, we accidentally got on the education thing anyway.
Yeah,
But
but it's
um
fun.
it is. And it's also like it's so complicated and so interconnected that like you could talk about it forever and never run out of like a new angle to approach it at. And like ultimately taking a big step back, yes, I think that experiential education of like an internship form notwithstanding, like would be so good for so many people. That being said, this guy has a job and is learning some things, and some of the other things like have you ever
But what
talked to
about
somebody who
posting teachers' classes? Like, let's say you're a really good teacher, right? You know, let's say for example, like I had a couple of teachers in college. I had a teacher in Binghamton. What's her name? She taught children's literature and adolescent literature and young adult literature. Sa I forgot her name. She was incredible. Like, she was definitely teaching while you were there. Signorati. Her name Elizabeth Signorati. She was amazing.
yeah.
And imagine if someone put her classes. Part of her compensation as a teacher was that someone put her classes online on YouTube and on podcasts and
Hello?
one second. Sorry, I got cut off again. Democratize the idea. Sorry, I got a work call, so I had to just hang up. I have to head off in like 2 minutes, but uh, democratize the idea that that her classes are so successful that people are going to want to go on, click on. It gets revenue. It gets views. And instead of you get a YouTube influencer or a celebrity influencer, you get teacher influencers that are just really freaking good at teaching their classes and really, really, really good
But
at and people view and people click and they may and the university puts it up and the university or the school will do all the marketing for the professor and the professor gets compensated based on how good their class is. Don't you think that would be an incredible way to get some of the best and most creative people into the classroom and teaching? Like, it's the same thing as a quote unquote startup, or the same thing as starting your own little business, starting your own, so you start off with a base salary of whatever teachers make, whatever, whatever benefits they get. and then all the extra people that are interested in viewing what they have to see, or seeing or learning from them and learning what from their perspective and from their classes, they get directly compensated for it. That would be an incredible way to draw in amazing teachers, don't you think?
I do. I will say that like these things to some degree exist. There's a tech entrepreneur podcast that I used to listen to where like in the middle of the podcast they were like it's become very clear to us that like nobody knows how to go, like there's no leadership training out there that's like touching on these things well enough, so they just developed their own because they're like it's a tech entrepreneur podcast made by tech entrepreneurs, so they did that. And there's Khan Academy and there's YouTube and there's all these things, and like giving it into the hands of the people who are maybe like better at educating, fine, I can agree with, but like there's an economics to this thing that isn't necessarily going to, right, the same way that like some of the failures, again, without digging too much into it, because I know you have to go, like some of the failures of the university system are because like long-term effects of like how their flywheel was
Wait,
spinning to
you cut out
direct
without
them
digging too much into
towards
what?
where we are now. I don't want to get too much into like the whole university is university worth it thing, but like some of the issues that exist now exist because like when you're spinning when you're generationally spinning the flywheel, you've set yourself up, and now you're iterating and you're iterating and iterating, and you accidentally or intentionally end up in a specific space, and you're like, okay, how did we get here and what went wrong? Some of it is that like, well, the purpose got lost in what this thing is. So if it comes to like the education aspects of these things, putting money in the hands of a teacher, and like having teachers teach things, and like, okay, but like what's the economics that are driving this thing, like how do we get to this point? And also like what's the bare minimum, because another like big aspect of this is like how students, what is it, like is this a right or is this a privilege, and how do we make sure that everybody, if we believe that everybody needs to have this, how do we make sure that everybody has this? um, yeah, no, this has been awesome. I appreciate you having me on.
Wait, Rami, you're breaking up.
I'm sure you should definitely
You
have
said,
some of them.
Rami, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. Hello? You said, is this a right or is this a what?
You're,
Hello,
you're a
hello, can you
full
hear me?
robot. Can you hear me now?
Oh, shit. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. You were saying, is this a right or is this a what?
Like a
You're talking about
privilege, right? Like
education.
if are we making,
Yeah.
yeah, are we making, and like what the forms and structures of those things are, and the opportunities that are provided through these things. And I think that again, it all gets really complicated and gets in it, and we've fallen totally off the deep end here. But I know you have to run, so I really appreciate you having me on.
All right, dude. Yeah, you keep on breaking up. But we're going to do this again. We're going to finish this because, or not going to finish, we're going to recontinue because this is so much fun. Dude, let's do this again soon, all right? Hopefully we'll do
Yeah,
this in person.
absolutely. Thank you, thank you.
All right, brother. I'll catch you soon. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone. Bye.